Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 36.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet, Ben, because we have a lot of fiction to talk about today.
Uh-huh.
For Bad at Numbers, number 36. This is a game-related one. We don't talk about games enough on this show, I feel like. 36 is the number of possible outcomes that you can get when you roll 2d6. And
as in two six-sided dice.
Two six-sided dice. That's just what I was going to go into because...
Sorry.
As a hardcore D&D nerd, I have to specify like how many, and then what kind of dice. So 2d6 is 2 dice with 6 sides, or 4d12s is 4 dice with 12 sides. And yes, there are dice with more sides than 6.
Okay, so 36 possible outcomes.
Yes.
The most likely of which is the number 7.
7, of course, because that's, if you look at a dice, it has 1, and 1 is the lowest number, 6 is the highest number. So there are the most combinations to make 7 between 1 and 6.
Okay. Yeah, hooray for 36.
Woo.
On episode 35 of the Bad at Magic podcast, we talked about what we call the shopping cart theory. And I'd given you a hard time because you explained to our listeners what a cart corral was for gathering shopping carts in the parking lot. And I neglected to mention something I should have mentioned that was ever present. You said, well, maybe our listeners in the UK. And I'd forgotten there's something very specific in the UK that factors into cart theory. Not just the UK, all over Europe. And that is, whenever you take a shopping cart at a place of shopping where you would need a cart, there's a financial transaction that takes place. And you put usually something of the equivalent of €1 or £1 into the shopping cart in order to have it released by a chain from a chain of shopping carts.
Oh, okay. So kind of like the carts at like an airport where you put in like $1 and then you get a cart.
Exactly. You make a deposit. And it influences the people that are on the chaotic and evil end of the spectrum enough that it tends to bring them into line with the common behavior. So basically, if you want to blow off returning your cart, it's going to cost you $1. And most people aren't willing to do that.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, there is some financial external incentive into returning your cart. Now, do you get your whole investment back, or is it just a portion of it?
You get your whole investment back.
Wow, that's
so
pretty legit.
There's a little chain on the cart that only can reach. It can't reach itself. You can't like pull it around and plug it into itself. It can only reach the next cart when it's fully pushed into a row of carts and engage with the cart in front of it. So you can't even put it into the cart corral badly. It has to go precisely into the cart corral.
Oh, okay. So you have to perfectly stack it the way that a paid employee would otherwise have to.
And then it will release your coin. Give
me my $1, you stupid cart machine.
Yeah, but it definitely has a much narrower range of possible outcomes with that situation.
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought this up, but I thought for sure that you were going to be the bigger man and acknowledge that on the Reddit we did get a comment from a listener that said in Asian countries they don't have shopping carts or cart corrals in the traditional Western sense. And so
it was good that you explained that.
There may be some listeners that didn't know what a cart corral was. So, more points for me.
Okay, I was wrong. Another point for Josh. So another thing that you mentioned last time was the fact that 2 classic Christmas movies, White Christmas and Holiday Inn, could have been filmed on the same set at the same time and just been spliced into 2 different movies.
I still feel that way.
Well, and I thought that was interesting, so I did a bit of research on it, and I found out that it's actually really fascinating. So, Holiday Inn was filmed in 1941, and it was in like the middle of production when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Oh dear. Okay.
So they didn't have enough time to like adjust the script or anything. So all they did to kind of give it a little bit of extra patriotic fervor was expand on the scene where they're doing like a 4th of July production on stage, and they added the little bit about the 4 services, Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines. But really that was it. It was kind of pre the United States has entered the war times. And the cast and crew of it, like you said, was just this back in the day when it was okay to just go on screen and tap dance for 15 minutes.
Yeah, but did you watch the movies?
I've watched. I did not watch those 2 this year, but I've watched them both. Alicia loves them, and she turns them on, almost every year. The Holiday Inn is notable in that it was the film in which was released the song White Christmas for the first time ever. And it was relatively popular when it came out because of the patriotic scene and this stuff. But it was, maybe the 8th most popular film that year. White Christmas, on the other hand, was basically the filmmakers, as if we thought we invented this in our time, basically remaking Holiday Inn. It was a remake. They recast it. They came out with a new video. It was the same musical producer, Irving Berlin, but they couldn't get the same cast, and so they got Danny Kaye instead of I can't think of his name.
Bing Crosby.
Bing Crosby was in both.
Okay. The other guy, Clark Gable.
Yeah. Oh man.
I don't know. I'm just saying old actors' names now. I'm sure my wife
you're doing really good.
Nicole is screaming at me through space and time listening to this podcast right now.
Fred Astaire.
There you go.
It was Danny Kaye instead of Fred Astaire. And he was astute. He took 10% of the profits and $200,000.
In 1942 money, that's like $8.6 million.
Yeah, well, it was the top at the time that White Christmas came out. It was the number one movie of the musical of the year by far, and the number one grossing musical of all time up to that point. So it was a big success. But it was very much the same plot roughly the same plot, a loose remake of sorts. So that's why they seem so similar.
Okay, well, all of that said, and how amazing these films were, and how interesting the backstory was, I cannot in good faith tell people to go watch these films because they just drag and they're slow and the pacing is off and they're just archaic.
If you like watching men dance.
If you like watching men dance strangely, just like the tap dancing, like, ooh, that's super impressive. I don't know. Tap dancing is one of those things, like, until you know how to do like a chain shuffle, you don't appreciate the complexity and intricacy of it.
Yeah, and I have, and I still don't appreciate those kinds of movies.
Go watch Die Hard. It's better.
So as we're recording now, it's the 27th of December. We just had Christmas. We went through all that with our families and our lives and the different places we are. And we're going to talk about all of that. And we'll go through our review of Christmas films. Lastly, here on the podcast, that'll be our feature today. But before we do that, did you have anything, how did Christmas go at your house? Did you have any issues or problems? How the kids happy?
I mean, it's Christmas, so of course there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be triumphs. There's always going to be, oh, I burned this dish, but this dish turned out better. There's always the little things, the little dramas that play out. One thing, I do have a bone to pick real quick, if you don't mind me delving into this.
Yeah, go for it.
So the problem with being under lockdown when you're trying to purchase Christmas gifts for family members is that Amazon Prime gives you free shipping. So, of course, I want the free shipping, Ben. So if I'm going to shop for Nicole, I have to go on her Amazon account, which she has the Prime.
The Prime is associated with a single individual.
Exactly. And so,
which gives you issues with the privacy of the information for the purposes of surprise.
Yes. So we kind of got around that this year because I said, I put in an additional shipping address, which was my name and our home address instead of her name and our home address. And I said, any box or package that comes to the door that has my name on it, you don't get to open. So the
only degree of secrecy you can preserve is just the noise level, as in she knows you got a package, but she doesn't know what's in it.
Well, she could just go click on my orders and figure out exactly what everyone has purchased for the last, forever, because that's how the internet works. But we were going on the honor system for that one.
Yeah, but honor system makes it seem like it's immoral to look. The real question is, does she want the sensation of surprise more than she wants the maintenance of the secret?
I'm trying to run my Nicole simulator in my head to figure out what she's thinking when it comes to gifts being purchased for her, but it just comes up blank. It just comes up as she just doesn't care. Like
you haven't gathered enough information for the simulator to produce an accurate simulation of this.
I don't know if she just doesn't care about not knowing what they are until she gets them, or if she really does care but also wants to preserve the secrecy, because from the outside those two things look exactly the same.
This feels like a problem that's going to get solved eventually. We had old ways of doing it. Back before shopping online was a thing. If you wanted to surprise someone, you took cash, you went to a store when they weren't around, you bought something, you had a reliable hiding place, and you were relatively assured you could produce a surprise on Christmas Day. Yes.
Well, and I attempted to do that this time. So we had the honor system for not looking at the orders tab, And we had the structure in place. If it's addressed to me, you don't open it. And that preserves the surprise. And I can wrap it separately. The kids can wrap it. And then we can actually shop for different people in the family. And everything will be fine. Squared away. Right up until Amazon ships one of my gifts in just its box. Not the Amazon box. Just the box that the gift itself came in. And just slapped their label on it. Wow, gee. Thanks, Amazon. Really preserving the magic of Christmas with this one.
Man, that's well, but okay, Josh, but you know that they are willing to work around this. They've already tried to address it a little bit, not solving the digital problem of being on a shared account, but like producing. There's the check this box if this is a gift.
I just assumed.
I'm sure it wouldn't come just in its box in its standard packaging if you check that box.
That's interesting because I just assumed that meant that they would ship it with a gift receipt or some way of returning it for the person.
Doesn't just mean that.
Does it gift wrap it? Have you used that box?
I have, but I haven't send it to myself like that, so I can't testify from firsthand experience what happens.
Interesting. I want to go order 2 things that cost $3 on Amazon, and I want to check the box. One of them, this is a gift, and the other one not, and I want to see how they come differently.
It needs to be a thing that they would send it just in its own packaging.
Oh, well, that's not a thing. That's a complete crapshoot when it comes to whoever at the warehouse is working today. Because
you don't think there's rules about it like that are just in the system? It's a data field in the database that when that item comes up on its own, it says just slap a label on it and send it.
I do not. I don't believe that at all because there is no rhyme or reason to how things get packed in those Amazon boxes.
Yeah,
we've had a giant Amazon box the size of a toddler, and we opened it, and it's nothing but those air-filled plastic baggies and like a tube of shampoo. And we're like, who was packing this thing? And, it makes sense. Maybe that guy ran out of the shoebox sizes and all he had was the giant boxes left. Who knows?
Okay, so Christmas is over. Did you succeed? Were you able to generate the surprises?
So I thought I did well because there was a couple of things that she needed that like broke down during the year. And I put a little earmark in my brain. And I remembered them. This is the thing. I never remember this stuff. And so I went to, the first thing I bought is she had a coffee mug that she loved to death. And it was a KU coffee mug because she went to KU.
Kansas University. The Jayhawks. Red and blue.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know if that's the right name. That's why I didn't say it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say University of Kansas or Kansas State University. I think it's, I don't know.
Kansas State's a different thing, but yes.
Okay. Thank you. She went to KU. Rock Chalk. But she loved that mug, but it had been through the dishwasher one too many times, and like all of the images on it were fading, and like there was water trapped in like the part that was supposed to be insulating.
That's a good safe replacement there.
And I felt so proud of myself when I bought like a fancy good replacement for that mug. And then my mother-in-law also bought my wife a mug from KU that was
cursed.
Just a little bit better than mine. And yeah, just right in the solar plexus on that one.
That sounds like right out of an episode of Seinfeld, where they're both sitting in the room. You open them both; they're the same thing. They're sitting next to each other on the table. One's obviously better than the other.
Yeah, it's like, oh well.
Then it becomes this like psychological experiment about who do you love more.
I thought it was just funny because. The other gift, I felt like I knocked out of the park because she had this electric blanket that she loved all the time, and it broke. It just got used too much. I'm like, perfect. I'll get her another electric blanket. That's the one that showed up without any wrapping from Amazon. So I went 0 for 2 on Christmas gifts this year. When it showed up at the house, she's like, "Oh, is this my Christmas gift?" I'm like, after swearing a bunch, I said, "Yes, that's your Christmas gift." She's like, "Can I open it and use it now?"
Okay, that's a good sign that you met the demand.
I said, yes, you may use this now, but I am going to wrap this empty box and put it under the tree. And I did.
For who? The kids?
For her. No, for her. Like, I had to give her something at Christmas. Come on.
Yeah, my wife has a tendency to do what you just described, whereas we're getting close to Christmas. She'll buy things people need and then set it aside. I'm like, but they need it. Give it to them now. She's like, no, this is going in their stocking.
Yeah, so that was my gripe about Christmas gifts. That's all. Other than that, Christmas went really well. It was good. How about you guys?
Well, I had a very unconventional one as far as those go. For having been in the military 16 years, I guess it was time I spent one away from home. So I'm still in Tampa, Florida. But I got one of the greatest gifts in that my wife put my eldest daughter on an airplane and sent her down here to me. So we've been having an adventure together, just me and my daughter for Christmas.
I did see a couple of pictures that you texted out and put on social media. I saw who I can only assume is you and a younger person at Disney World. You were wearing full face covering, so I could see was the eyes.
I know that my level of comfort on this completely exceeds your own as far as going out into public. Having returned now from spending 3 days in amusement parks over the holiday season, I want to make one thing abundantly clear here. The Walt Disney Company is very good at COVID protocols. And I did not realize how good they were until I spent 2 days in Walt Disney World and then went to Universal Studios Orlando yesterday. And my daughter and I looked at each other, and it just felt like the ghetto compared to Disney World. In Disney World, they had 8 Advent Health tents set up at the entrance where they did their health screening, and it felt like legit and official. And that they were deadly serious about following all the procedures. Every single person, with no exceptions, wore masks. The only time they didn't even allow you to take your masks off for photos. The only place in the park you were allowed to take masks off is if you were seated and eating or in designated mask removal places where you sanitize going in and out.
Wow. That is pretty hardcore.
And they had probably about 30% of the rides were shut down, probably because they just couldn't come up with good accommodations to make them maintain social distancing and touching things. And what they did is they utilized the line space of the adjacent closed down rides as additional line space to basically accordion out the lines for the ones that were still operating.
Oh, okay.
And then they just had marked spots on the ground so that you never ended up stopping next to someone either beside you or in front of you within the 6-foot bubble. And then they built walls on top of all the fences. It was impressive. And I actually felt pretty safe. I don't know for sure that I'm negative for COVID, but I don't feel like I had any unreasonable exposure in 3 days in amusement parks in Central Florida.
So in saying all of that, you feel like like you're just saying Disney did a great job. Now, the company can do a great job, but the weakest part of any system is the people. How were the people that were there responding to that?
So I think there was a different kind of clientele at Universal than at Disney. But other than comparing those two, you took the diversity of population where you had people that say this mask stuff is a bunch of bullcrap, it doesn't help, it makes me uncomfortable, it makes it worse or whatever. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were one of those people. The rule was if you want to be in this park, these are the rules you will conform to. If you do not wish to conform to these rules, you may leave the park. And that was very clear from the onset, and there were no non-compliance that I saw anywhere.
That is very impressive. And so the social distancing, the mask wearing, it was just universally accepted and adopted.
Yes, everyone was sanitizing their hands. Everyone was wearing their mask. No exceptions.
Wow. I'm genuinely surprised that happened.
Yeah. So I come away from it thinking like, I don't know, maybe somebody there got through the screening and was COVID positive and could potentially have infected someone, but my exposure was still kind of low.
So then the only question remaining is, how was Christmas at Disney?
It was magical.
Oh, Disney, go ahead and sponsor the show if you feel like it.
It was great. I loved it.
So
we had a great time.
How was the trip with your oldest daughter? Is she still there?
Yeah, she's still here. She's in the other room. So she helped me this week as we watched all the movies together and did a deconstruction on the magical elements, and she helped me out. So that'll go factor into our discussion later. But she brought down a few Christmas presents that my wife sent. I got a backpack for my disc golf discs, which is nice. Now I don't have to carry them in a shopping bag like I was.
Oh, it sounds way more Florida to have it in a shopping bag, though.
Yeah. And she sent me a Lego set that I haven't put together yet, so I'm looking forward to that later tonight.
Legit. Very high quality gifts.
How about you? Do you get anything you like?
So my son actually got me a really cool gift. And just some random pot metal cheapo bottle openers, but they're formed like the Infinity Gauntlet that Thanos wore.
That's right. You sent me a photo of that in a text.
They got like those fake little rhinestones, whatever, and all the knuckles, but the colors are all right and the position is correct. And so it's just awesome. It feels good opening my beverage of choice with the Infinity Gauntlet.
That was awesome, Josh. I want to revel in this moment for a second. I want to think about the fact that you're sitting there around the Christmas tree. You open up this gift from your son, you look at it, and for a second, you are holding this little tiny infinity gauntlet in your hand, and you're checking the position of the infinity stones in the gauntlet to make sure they're all in the right position. That is awesome.
I had to
Maybe my
acknowledge
daughter knows what the correct position of those infinity stones in the gauntlet are, but I have no freaking clue. Other than I think the yellow one goes in the thumb stone.
Nope, that's the time stone. The green
Back
stone
of the
goes
fist?
in the thumb one. On the fist, the green goes in the thumb.
I cannot remember it all then.
All right,
No
so
clue.
as a tangent, one of my favorite little details from those movies is that Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet was left-handed, and then the Infinity Gauntlet that Tony Stark made was right-handed.
Ah.
For no other reason. It's never called out, just as a nice little
Just throw away
symmetry. Nice,
curiosity.
perfectly balanced as all things should be.
But so are the positions of the stones mirrored from one to the other?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and
right.
watch Endgame again. Interesting tidbit.
Okay, that will make a great graphic for me to create as I'm publishing this show. Okay, well, I'm happy you got that. That was it? That was your notable gift, was the Infinity Gauntlet bottle opener?
Oh no, I got a lot of good gifts. The other great gift that I've super been enjoying is my wife got me these wonderful man slippers. And I'm
very
holding,
nice.
And for your listeners, I'm holding it up to the camera so Ben can see it.
They kind of look like Crocs.
They're slippers. They keep my feet warm because my feet get cold sometimes. And
Not anymore.
not anymore. And they've got actual hard rubber soles, so for when I have to take out the trash, because I have to do that. And I've been doing it in flip-flops, and my tootsies get a little nippy. And my wife said this, and she goes, I shopped for a long time to find the manliest ones I could, and I found these, and they're dark gray on the outside, and they're high-vis hunter's yellow on the inside. And I have to admit
that is orange, man.
it's it's the high-vis orange color. It's like a reflective vest kind of orange. And honestly, I have to agree with her. It does make them cooler.
I like it.
I'm wearing them now because it is cold in here, but my feet are nice and snug.
So it's time for Bad English.
It's time.
Today's word for bad English is posh.
This is a
Posh.
word I actually know and use.
Yeah, it's a good one. And I don't really, we really have a good equivalent of it in American English. Maybe it was introduced to some people when the Spice Girls started to become popular, and we had one of the Spice Girls that was Posh Spice. And you knew by looking at her what posh meant because she was slightly upper class. You know, she looked like she was better than you.
The Spice Girls were a little before my time, but did we really get introduced because of Posh Spice? Like, were they ever that popular?
It kind of has three meanings. I mean, if you go way back to when, like English doesn't sound like it did now, it meant a substantial sum of money. But it came to be used metaphorically for anything pricey or upper class. So you might say that she has a posh accent, which it doesn't have anything to do with being pricey, but it sounds like a rich person.
Yeah, we're talking about My Fair Lady stuff there.
Yeah. Or it could also be used to mean stylish, elegant, or exclusive. And even poor people might use it like, hey, that's a posh vest. Just like, hey, that looks nice, or it makes you look upper class. Or it could be used as like a pejorative, like you're getting uppity. Like, there's a new posh neighbor moving in next door that thinks they're all that.
That's a tonal thing you'd have to say. It's like, check out that guy. Oh, yeah, he's quite posh.
Yeah, exactly. So what was your exposure to it? Why did you know it?
Oh, well, we watch a ton of British sitcoms and baking shows. And so just understanding I don't know, like you said, there's not a real good English equivalent, like American English equivalent of posh. And so it just kind of creeps into the zeitgeist. Like
you might say like snooty or I don't know.
So, for example, we had Christmas dinner the other day. Nicole made savory meat pies that were just to die for. We had, all of our normal Thanksgiving sides, and then she baked this wonderful apple pie, and just like the whole spread was fantastic. And then my brother-in-law was here, and he goes, "Oh, this is really fancy meal. You guys went all out." And then I don't remember if it was me or my wife. And like, yes, we are quite posh.
There you go. Yeah, isn't that the point of bad English? Like, hopefully we're expanding your horizons. You can use some new language, and if we don't have a good American term that fits the bill, let's adopt a British one.
This is one of the few times that I agree with that sentiment right there, because half the time these bad English phrases are like a nuance wrapped in an inside joke baked in history that you don't understand.
Yeah, well, this is a Posh podcast, so we do that kind of thing from time to time.
Quite highbrow.
Well, give us some bad parenting.
Okay, so this was fun. My daughter got some kites. Like I don't know when all this started, but like for a month we've had fully constructed like starter beginner level kites in our closet, and we've just been waiting for the windy day. Actually, no, that's not true. We were waiting for two things. We were waiting for a windy day and for our children to remember that we had kites and to tell us, hey, it's windy, we need to go fly kites.
Okay, I understand how those, if this was a logic that you'd put in like a computer program, both of those conditions needed to be true.
Yes, because if it was windy out and we noticed but the kids didn't, we didn't say anything.
Okay.
But one day it was windy and the kids remembered and the kids noticed. Like, hey, it's windy out, we should fly the kites. Like, yes, the conditions have been met, let us fly the kites. So we put our coats on, and like it was windy and a little chilly out. It is Arizona, so it was down in like the 70s. So I wore a jacket. Yeah, no, I mean, we were risking hypothermia going to the pocket park to fly kites that day. But what was really funny is I noticed this while it was happening is my daughter Jane, who is 6, I tell her, Jane, get a jacket. Like she goes, but it's not cold outside. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Get a jacket just in case. And she came in and got the jacket. And I look at my son who was outside, and I'm like, who also was not wearing a jacket. And I went to myself, meh, whatever. And then my wife goes, why are you telling her to get a jacket, not him? And then this thought catalyzed, and it came to the forefront of my brain. It's because you protect your daughter. But the boy, he'll learn his lesson.
Yes, I've done this exact thing. Are we wrong? Are we male chauvinist pigs?
Maybe we are. I don't know. But this is such a deep-seated thing.
I didn't even question it when I do it. I don't feel bad about it. I'm like, I'll take care of the girl. The boy will learn his lesson.
Yes. And that's what came to the forefront of my brain. But it is so deep in there that I can't dredge up the core reasoning behind it. It just lives there. It's the same concept of, we had this conversation not too long ago, me and my wife, the expectation of our children when they become eligible and old enough to be dating. It's so you encourage the boy, but you discourage the girl. I mean, not necessarily discourage, but the conversation is very different there. And I don't know if this is going to keep our PG rating or not. I'll let you decide. But the phraseology that I came up with at the time was the difference between boys and girls is that girls are seen as prey by the boys who are hunting them. And so the conversation has to be different, and you have to treat them differently. So I don't know, that's
kind of far removed from the calculus of whether or not to wear a jacket to go fly a kite at the park.
Not really. It's the girl needs to be defended, and the boy needs to learn to fend for himself. Like, he's the hunter-gatherer. He's going to be out there, like, pounding the pavement, just making his name and making his place for himself in the world. Not to say that a girl can't, but that there are so many social and just cultural situations where the female is going to be on the defensive simply because she is female.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can't get to the bottom of it either. Even you telling me this, I'm trying to deconstruct it in my head, and I can't figure out why I would do the exact same thing that you just described. Maybe we're part of the problem.
Yes, it's so rooted into us culturally that we can't find the bottom of it. And until you do, you can't get it out of your head.
Yeah.
So it's just...
Yeah, I would just make decisions that are the equivalent of that without thinking it through.
It applies. This little nuance of how you treat the boys and the girls, I feel like it applies in so many ways, because I can imagine my son getting his heart broken by some girl, and I'm just going to like try to cheer him up and be like, it's going to happen a bunch of times, so you need to learn how to deal with it. But if some boy broke my daughter's heart, all I can think of is the amount of property damage that I'm going to inflict upon this kid.
Yeah. Well, this leads right into another thing I wanted to talk about on this episode, and that is one of what the Hello Internet podcast calls the necessary lies of civilization. Those are the lies that we tell ourselves and to each other, and we agree are okay in order to prop up civilization. And I think one of those lies, this might be controversial or it might not, is that parents don't have favorite children.
Ooh, are you saying you have favorite children?
Even the way I'm gonna quote a line to you out of the movie The Trial of the Chicago 7, I think it was called. You phrased that question in the form of a lie.
So I'm going to get around this by saying I only have 2 children, and that they are different enough that they fall into 2 different categories of children, and so they are both my favorite in different categories.
Yeah. Again, and your playfulness here illustrates what I think is the underlying point, and that is that we've agreed as a society to pretend, more so than we've agreed to as a society pretend in the existence of Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy, that grown-ups don't have favorite children.
Yes.
It is one of the necessary lies of civilization.
Spoilers for Santa Claus, everyone. Don't let your kids listen to this podcast.
We think of it, we're just getting started in the reasons your children should not be listened to this podcast. The necessary lie here is that we look at people who have broken this covenant, who have essentially told their children that there's no Santa Claus, in the perspective of grown-ups pretending that they don't have favorite children, and we think of people that do that as bad parents.
Well, and we only think that way because we assume the emotional damage that they are then inflicting upon the non-favorites or the others, or just the now emotional and social dynamic that exists amongst siblings that know their ranking in order of preference.
Yeah, and there's a verbal game we play surrounding this. I remember it as a child. When I was a child, I remember I went to one time, I asked my mother a form of the question of, do you love me or daddy more? Oh. I don't know why I thought this was necessary to ask my mother.
Okay.
And I was expecting her to say something like, I love you both.
Now, that's very Oedipal, but like children and spouses are different.
Right. And my mother decided it was time for me to learn that and said, I love your father more. And didn't mince any words about it. And I felt offended. I think I may have cried. But she was unapologetic about it, and good for her.
Interesting. I'm trying to imagine a scenario where one of those trolley problems where you can save your kids or you can save your spouse. Which one do you choose? And honestly, my first inclination is to save my spouse because I love my spouse more than my kids. Sorry, kids. I'm a guy. You had to grow on me.
We kind of talked about that with like when you had to decide during childbirth whether to save the mother or to save the child.
Yes. Yeah.
That's before you know the child.
For a guy, it's different. Like Carter and Jane listening to this from the future, I'm sorry. It took a couple of months, all right? Like, you guys were kind of a chore at the beginning there. But I have always loved my spouse, and I picked my spouse. The kids, they just appeared and materialized in my life. But here's the thing. Like, in that trolley problem, I would have to save my kids because I know if I saved my wife, she would then immediately murder me for not having saved the kids.
Yeah. Well, that leads to another one of the necessary lies of civilization. I mean, we have Santa Claus, that we've all just kind of have a general pact that we agree for the wellness of the fantasies of children to preserve his existence. Whenever you see a baby, all babies are cute. Even if they aren't, you say that they are. It makes the mother feel better, and we don't know what the baby understands yet.
Most babies are not very cute.
All brides are beautiful, and for no other reason than they went to some trouble to try to look presentable that day. This is one of the necessary lies of civilization. Another one.
Hang on a second. I have a life hack here. Listeners, if you're ever around a bride who is not quite beautiful and she asks you, how do I look? Don't say anything about her. Just talk about how lovely her dress is. Because now you're not lying. And you're pointing out all the things that she wants you to.
These are the necessary lies of civilization. These lies are important. I want you to tell them.
Tell
the bride she is beautiful.
How do I look? Meh, could be better.
It's about you.
I don't know. Did you have a couple?
Does this dress make me look fat?
Could you have? All right. So I hate that verbal trap. It's like, how do I look in this outfit? And because I've discovered that there's no right answer. Because if I just say, "Oh, honey, you look great in everything," she's like, "Oh, you're no help." And then I make exactly. That. I know
you're a liar.
No.
I need the truth.
I make that mental note, and I'm like, okay, next time I'm going to give her the truth. And then we get to the next time. How does this look? It's like, I don't know. What are your other options? Well, this shirt is a little weird this way, but this one, the cut's a little more flowy on this side. And then she just looks at me like all I wanted was validation of what I'm wearing, you ass.
Oh, Just update your simulator and move on.
But there's no winning. All right, so
Okay.
if we have necessary lies, then we have to stop being asked impossible questions.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's other necessary lies. Violence is never the answer, or whoever got in line first should go first. Those kinds of things.
Whoever got in line first should go first. Then.
Yeah, exactly. You believe that lie.
That's not
and
a
they prop
lie.
up civilization. Nuh-uh, there's reasons.
We could have another whole episode about that.
Okay, you know how all the checkouts in the military base exchange have signs over them that say military in uniform have priority during these hours?
Yes.
I went into the store this week and it was like Christmas shopping and all the lines were stacked up. And I was just walking towards the lines and someone actually offered to let me cut in front of them in the very front of the line and they had like 5 people behind them. And I was mortified. I was in uniform. I was like, no, man, I'm not doing that.
How many things were you buying?
I had like I had a couple of Cliff Bars in my hand, I think.
You know what, Ben? Good on you for respecting the sanctity of the line.
Yeah. Okay, but back to the original lie that we were talking about, and that is that parents don't have favorite children. You want to know the truth? Of course they do. Of course they do.
Your daughter is in that room.
The reason people prefer different foods. Sometimes children taste bad, like a food that you don't like. And sometimes they taste good, like a food that you do like. And you have preference of one over the other, but you don't always have the same preferences. But here's the real bottom line of any good parent anywhere. Your favorite child is the one that needs you right now. They're the one that needs you to pay attention to them. They're the one that needs your love and your kindness. And so you don't express that in terms of favoritism. You express that in terms of giving.
Aw, that is a wonderful sentiment. I like that. And I also want to point out something to be clear. Like, just because you say you like one kid more than the other, that doesn't mean you dislike the other child. All of your children should be over the threshold of I enjoy these people in my life. And just the difference between the children is one's just a little bit higher on that scale than the other. You like all of them. You love all of your kids. Now, if you're listening to this, listener, and you have a child that falls below that spectrum, where it's like, oh, I really love kid X, but kid Y, man, I wish they would just wander off into the sunset someday. Like, you might need to reassess your own personal feelings.
Yeah. I was talking to a good friend of mine today, and they had, when they were 16 years old, their mother committed them to a mental hospital to get rid of them from their life. And the wounds they bear now as an adult in their mid-40s from that experience as a 16-year-old are so profound. They're off the charts.
Of a child actually being told and demonstrated to that they are not valued by their parents.
Right, exactly.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take the lighter side of this. And if my kids ever do ask me, who do you like more, me or the other one? I'm going to make sure both of them are present. And then I'm going to tell them the truth. And then I'm going to tell them why. It's like, oh, well, today I actually like this child better because he cleaned his room and you didn't. You play them off of each other. Constructive feedback so they can improve performance. This is Management 101.
Very good. Yeah. And I love all of my children. And out of a profound sense of duty that comes from the fact that I brought them in the world and I'm responsible for their existence, I love all of them. But they also have brought a great deal of joy and happiness to my life through their unique things that they have that aren't necessarily what I would have chosen. Kind of like being presented with a dish that isn't what you would have cooked, but you find to be enjoyable nonetheless.
Let's be clear. Alicia brought these children into the world. You were involved at best.
All right, I think it's time to move on to our feature, which is our movie review that we've been building up to for a couple of weeks.
Woo! All right, everybody. This is the part of the podcast where if you don't care about Christmas movies, and if you don't, you're a monster, and shame on you. But if you don't, this is where you get to bail out. Because what we are going to...
We'd solicited from our listeners a list of Christmas movies for us to review. I think this could be an annual feature. There's definitely enough Christmas movies out there. But the 5 that we had nominated this time were Nightmare Before Christmas, Polar Express, Muppets Christmas Carol, Arthur Christmas, and The Santa Claus.
This is a very wide range of Christmas movies. We had an animated movie. We had live action. We had CGI animated. We claymated, like the whole spectrum here.
Yeah, and yet kind of narrow. We had 4 movies that were exclusively about Santa Claus, and one that was kind of a retelling of an old tale from colonial Britain. I don't
Victorian
know what to call
England?
it.
Yeah.
Victorian England.
Ugh,
And
Dickens.
now, just listener, if you're new to the show, because this is the Bad at Magic podcast, what we do here when we review things like books and movies is we're evaluating how bad at magic they are. So for the purposes of these 5 Christmas movies, we're going to be we're using a derivation of what Brandon Sanderson's uses for evaluating magic systems. And that is determining whether the use of the magic system is a hard magic system or a soft magic system. A hard magic system being one that has specific, clear, understood rules and limitations, or a soft magic system that's vague and undefined where rules and limitations are never clearly explained.
Yes.
And then how well they adhere to what we call Sanderson's laws of magic. And there's 3 of them with an asterisk 4th. An author's ability to solve a conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. So how well do we know what the rules of the magic system are?
And these are important. I need to put the footnotes on these because
Go ahead.
The Sanderson's laws of magic are specific to storytelling. What makes a good story using magic? And this one, like the author's ability to resolve conflict with the magic, like if you as the reader don't understand the magic system, or the viewer in this case, then whenever the protagonist solves their problem with the magic, you're going to think it's BS. Think of the ending of Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker, where we had random resurrections, we had the Emperor force tasing entire starships out of the sky. We didn't know what the rules were, and so the whole thing just felt like contrived and a letdown.
Yeah, it wasn't good storytelling.
Right. So,
all right,
go ahead.
The second rule is that the limitations are just as important, or maybe more important, because of they constrain it, and then if the protagonist can act within the constraints of the system, that's more interesting.
Personally, for
what the magic system is capable of.
Yeah, for me, the second law here: the limits are more important than the capabilities. This is why I don't like any of the Harry Potter films or movies. Movies, or books, rather, I should probably say. Because
there's really no limitations.
There is no limit to what magic can do. And like sometimes they have to say words, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just got to point the wand really hard. And so whenever they solve the problem with
there's a death spell.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's also a death spell in real life called any gun. Like, let's not get started on Harry Potter. But the fact that there are no limits, it feels like there are no stakes. It feels like, we just need bigger and badder for the closing of the story.
Yeah, and then the third law is expand on what you have before you add something new. And that is just, work with what you got instead of just solving every problem with pulling something ex nihilo.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Harry Potter franchise, again, for every single movie coming up with some new way that the plot gets resolved with no problems whatsoever.
I just spent yesterday afternoon in Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley, so I feel kind of defensive right now. You leave the Harry Potter universe alone, Josh.
The Harry Potter universe can be a fun and interesting universe to live in, but it is crap storytelling, and I will die on that hill.
All right. And then law 0 is if a conflict comes up, don't these 3 rules aren't set in stone. Always err on the side of that which is awesome.
Yes, if it makes for a much cooler story or a better resolution to break one of these rules, then go ahead and break it.
Yeah. Okay. So what film should we start with?
Oh man, I love all of these movies so much. Actually, no, I don't. I watched all of these movies, and some are far better than the others. Like, I'm not supposed to say which ones are my favorite, because that's one of the lies we tell each other, or tell ourselves in society. But I'm actually very interested in what you feel, or what you got out of Arthur Christmas, because that's one of my favorite Christmas movies.
Okay, let's start with Arthur Christmas.
So for anybody, so spoilers, everybody, for all of the Christmas movies that we're about to talk about. And if you didn't watch the movies, shame on you. And now it's past Christmas, so you probably get them on discount. But if you didn't, Arthur Christmas is a movie that sets up Santa Claus as having like a whole family that live at the North Pole full time, and their job is being, Santa Claus.
The first thing go ahead with your plot synopsis.
They have this army of elves, and the movie sets it up as it's a very militarized, bureaucratic system that they've established, very hierarchical. this is your job, your sector. People call each other sir. They're all wearing camouflage. They got like berets on. They have giant equipment to get the mission done. And the mission is Christmas night, where they deliver all of these toys. One of the toys goes undelivered, and then it's the misfit son of Santa Claus's attempt to try to deliver the one missing toy, and then shenanigans pursue. And honestly, I feel like it's hilarious the whole way.
So one thing I didn't know until I think maybe made it to the credits is it was released by Sony Pictures Animation. It's completely CGI, but it was produced by Aardman Animations, the company behind Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep.
Yeah, very British.
Yeah, so it definitely has that British feel behind it. One thing I was really having a hard time getting past is it was like somebody had a checklist of common movie tropes that they were just going down the list and checking everything off to the point it started to gain some momentum towards the end, and it became less frequent, but it was so much in the beginning it was really distracting me. Okay, so it has that manic energy of Wallace and Gromit or Shaun the Sheep or those kinds of things, and very British, like you said. It starts off with the bookend story of a little girl that makes a wish for a particular Christmas gift, and kind of establishes the feel of like, what is the value of Santa Claus? Santa Claus is in once a year, your dreams come true as a little kid, and that's important. That's like the driving force behind this film. Would you agree with that?
I would. It's just trying to maintain the magic for the innocence of the world.
Yeah. And what I think eventually becomes... I thought the military thing that you were talking about was inconsequential. It was just the mise-en-scène of this particular movie, that this iteration of Santa was going to be militarized. But it later became an important point that this individual had chosen to militarize the Santa thing, and that was a problem.
Yes, because we have the two sons of Santa Claus. We've got the one that is...
Arthur and Steven?
Arthur and Steve. And Steve is super hardcore, like the CEO of
a
Fortune 500
high
company.
and tight haircut.
Oh, yeah.
He looks like a Marine Corps officer.
Revolutionized the process, like replaced the old rickety sleigh with a giant spaceship, trained the elves on infiltration, like knows every kid to their serial number and what they need. Like this huge operation center, like really revolutionized the Christmas gift delivering system. And at the other end of the spectrum is we've got our poor misfit Arthur, who works in letters, and he writes the letters back from Santa Claus to the kids, explaining how Santa cares so much, and using Christmas magic and the dreams of the innocent. He's going to make this wish come true for you, little child.
Yeah. And they contrast Arthur from Stephen in that Arthur believes in the purity of the motivation behind doing the Santa Claus thing, and Stephen is effective in executing the mechanics of the Santa Claus chore
without ever really appreciating or embracing the spirit of what he is trying to accomplish.
Definitely. So I was having trouble identifying what part of this was magic.
Oh, come on. First of all, they have a spaceship that goes like 183 times the speed of sound or some nonsense. There is the traditional rickety old sleigh with flying reindeer that they have flying around. There is an army of elves living at the North Pole, let us not forget. The old sleigh had all these like steampunky levers that did giant random things that couldn't possibly fit inside of that little sleigh.
Okay, so you sound like you're leaning towards what I did with this film, and that is that the magic system is very soft.
The magic system is very soft, yes, I have to say.
Pseudoscience and vague nonsense about dust from the Milky Way and stuff like that.
I love that they had this big, long, scientific-y sounding name for this tub of stuff, and then Arthur completely negates it all by going, magic
fairy dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mined from the Aurora Borealis itself. Well, you can't really mine out of light. Whatever, it's fine. Blowing all that off. The magic system is very soft and exists only to the extent that it needs to in order to tell the story of Santa Claus being real. I have liked this story, though, for the idea, of all of the Christmas movies I have ever seen, this is the only one to me that even comes close to being able to achieve the objective that is Christmas. They have a spaceship the size of a small city, and they deploy hundreds of thousands of elves simultaneously to deliver gifts all in 20 seconds.
Yes. Now they do that in the opening scene where after they establish there's a little girl that needs a wish granted, then they bring the elves to the city and they go down to the city and they're timing it and all the elves go back up and every present has been delivered to every house within the city in just a few seconds or whatever, and they go back into the spaceship and they fly to the next town. And immediately I could see the spaceship was flying over countryside where there obviously were like small houses that weren't in a city. And I thought, fail. Like you can't do it. So let's talk about this in the first film because I think it's going to come up at least in 4 of the 5. That what is the Santa Claus problem? What are this? I think this gets to the second rule of the 3 rules of magic. What are the limitations? What is the Santa Claus problem?
The Santa Claus problem is there's something like, what is there, 7 billion, a little over 7 billion people on Earth right now. And so if we factor
maybe a
out
billion of those are children.
A billion, 2 billion at the outside, being children of Santa Claus age, right?
Right.
That are geographically scattered all over the planet.
In one night, in one rotation of the Earth.
Now, interestingly, one of these movies does address a little bit of this, the Santa Claus, because the kid starts coming back with, well, you don't start, like, there's 7 billion people on Earth. Yeah, but not all of them are gift-giving age. Not all of them believe in Christmas or celebrate Christmas, and so the whole Santa Claus thing is null and void there. Some of them are naughty, so they don't even get presents, so you can just completely skip them entirely.
So the problem isn't as big as you think it is, but it's still pretty big.
It's still pretty big, especially when you bring in that thing. Like if you have big population centers, yeah, you can probably be very, very efficient when you're talking about delivering gifts in New York City. It starts becoming a problem when you're talking about rural Kansas.
Almost all of these films with, I'm going to say this a lot of times, the exception being the Muppet Christmas Carol, all the ones that are about Santa Claus have at least one scene where they have some kid rattle off some version of the Santa problem. Every kid knows these limitations. It's like we know that they're so insurmountable that we start off by acknowledging them up front. We get it, kid. This house doesn't have a chimney. We understand there's a billion kids on Earth. We get it, kid, that... So here's my list. I sat down and tried to make a list of all of the Santa Claus problem. The list, as in knowing all the children and knowing who's naughty or nice. Succession, as in some point Santa Claus is going to be too old and needs to be replaced. How do you address that? Geography. This is spread over a very wide geographic distance, and it has a lot of variety, and that causes problems. Time. It all has to be done within the space of one night. Letters. How do you deal with all the letters that go to the North Pole and are sent by the kids, and how do you answer them and all that? The food, as in if every single kid put out milk and cookies for Santa Claus in one night, what's that going to do to the poor guy? Execution. You have to be perfect in order to meet and make the wishes of every single kid on Earth. Santa's motivation. Why does he want to do this, and what's he trying to do? And last but not least, the logistics of the toys.
Okay.
So that's my list of the Santa problem.
That is perfect, because I think Arthur Christmas checks every one of those boxes in a satisfactory way.
They tried to.
Yes. There was a Succession deal. They had a whole hallway with all the different pictures of Santa Claus on it. They talk about the letters. They have a whole section and Department of Elves dedicated to the intake and processing of children's letters. The naughty and nice thing is on the fly. The elves had the little wrist things that they scanned the kid while they were sleeping and gave them a percentage of naughty or nice. The food and stuff left out for Santa Claus was converted to biofuel. That was a throwaway line that happened in the background of the spaceship.
Yeah, it's like they sat down and looked at this list and tried to check them all off as in answering them.
Well, and here's the other thing.
Is this a necessity? If you're going to make a movie about Santa Claus, do you have to try to satisfactorily answer every item on the list?
Yes, I think you do. Because from a meta perspective, you have to understand that these movies are going to be seen and they're targeted at children. And like you said, children know these limitations. Children all have this brewing in the back of their minds as they're getting to that age where they're like wishy-washy and wondering if this is really a thing.
They're like, no way this is going to work.
Yeah, and so it's what, in order to maintain the lie that we in society have all agreed to, is you kind of have to check off some of those boxes in order to try to put the kids, the viewers' mind at ease. Yeah,
and a couple of these films, they just put in the minimum level of effort to acknowledge that the limitations exist and that they can be addressed.
Yes, and that's, we'll get to some of those, but I think Arthur Christmas...
But Arthur Christmas, I agree with you, is the one that tried to comprehensively address every limitation on the list.
Well, and it's kind of like you were talking about before, is contrasting the two characters that were going to be the successors to the next Santa Claus. they had to really go deep on this guy is the operations guy and he's got it all figured out. And in just displaying and showing that, they had to go through all of these things.
So the central conflict of the movie is due to just the vicissitudes of conducting this massive global operation, there's going to be errors. And that night there was an error, and our little bookend girl that we started the film with, her bicycle she wished for got lost in the shuffle. They returned to the North Pole, having delivered presents to all of the other billion children on Earth, and they found out that they missed one.
Yes, and like then the conflict becomes like Steve thought he had done like executed the perfect Christmas, and this is a mistake and a blemish to his record. And Arthur, all he cares about is we have to maintain the sanctity of Christmas for everyone. And so then there's the grandpa who is the retired Santa Claus who just butts heads with Steve because Steve thinks he's old-fashioned and ridiculous, and they're constantly arguing all the time. And old Santa just wants to just show off and one-up Steve and offers to give...
He wants to show him why the good old days were better than what you're doing now.
I don't know if it's so much that as... just I was a better Santa Claus than you could ever hope to be because I did it so old-fashioned.
But we've talked about this before, with the back in my day, video games used to be hard. It's back when I was Santa, I still got the same job done that you're doing without all this fancy stuff.
My favorite part between those two button heads is when they're having the dinner. It's like my spaceship flies around the world at 138 times the speed of sound or whatever, and delivered this many presents flawlessly. And then the grandpa stands up and gets in his face like 1943, World War II. I did the whole thing with 6 reindeer and a drunken elf. And like just the conflict between those two is such a rich source of comedy in that movie.
Yeah, I think this movie, one, it was too long. I found myself just looking at my watch sometimes when I was watching it because it was like they didn't cut anything out. They had all these brilliant ideas. It needed like one less problem to deal with.
There are so many scenes in that movie that I still quote to this day. I love the old guy is so racist against the elves. Like the old Santa Claus just sees elves as this completely expendable resource. Like what was like the one elf that was with them is like, so we're breaking 17 rules right now. Elf, wrap your head. Yes, sir. And she immediately, no questions asked, like
wraps her head in wrapping paper. Yeah, that was hilarious.
How awesome was that the whole interplay between those two characters was just
so I didn't think of it, but you're right. It's like elf racist. So, okay, there was a lot of charm in this movie. I started making a list at one point of like all the things that charmed me, all the British kitsch I loved. And some of it would go completely over the head of an American who hadn't, lived there for 3 Christmases. But like there's the scene you mentioned, the dinner scene. They're sitting around the table and they're participating in a tradition where they eat and they have on their plate what's called a Christmas cracker. It's a little cylindrical toilet paper tube, and it has basically a little pyrotechnic charge inside that makes a popping sound when you pull on the ends of it. And the inside are kitschy toys and a little paper crown. And they all took off the little paper crowns and put them on their heads. But you might not have even thought of that as something unusual as an American watching it. But that's a big deal. Like every year, the British have a Christmas dinner where they do that.
That's cool. I knew that was a British thing. I didn't know it was so steeped in tradition.
Yeah, and I mean, they showed the red mailbox, and they ate mince pies, and all the actors were British actors, and they were all very good British actors. I mean, there were some favorites there. I think Arthur was the guy who plays Professor X in the latest iteration of the X-Men movies, James McAvoy.
Yeah, Stephen was played by Hugh Laurie, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. They had that manic military efficiency. Arthur was really earnest. Grand Santa was the old guy reminiscent about the old days. Sometimes the manic action just reminded me of any Aardman production where it's just, Wallace and Gromit and everything's going crazy and it just makes you chuckle and smile. Sometimes it was relentless. And I just was like, oh my gosh, does something else have to go wrong so we can fly around like crazy, with a sleigh being pulled by 3 reindeer and a piece of junk from a junkyard with Grandpa flying out the back.
Do we need this to balance the sleigh? Oh no! If anything, it's going to slow us down.
Just get to the point.
No, I actually like that. And the movie felt like you're talking about. It was one small problem that just kept compounding and compounding, and it built to this giant crescendo where the entirety of the North Pole was back in action, just trying to resolve this tiny problem.
And the protagonist's flaws were legitimate. Grand Santa still had a bit of pride. Santa didn't want to lay it down. Steve wanted to succeed and wanted to be this paragon of military efficiency, and Arthur just wanted to preserve the spirit of Christmas. But it felt like there was one too many.
I don't know. I have such a soft spot in my heart for this movie because it was such a delight watching it the first time that I'm going to sit here and defend it to you. But
those were all things I like. I'm still on my list of things I like.
Oh, good.
At the beginning, I saw Santa come out with medals on his suit and wearing a beret, and I thought, okay, this is just the mise-en-scène of what we're doing here. This is just part of the thing in the film. And I realized it turned out to be something of great consequence. That at some point between Grand Santa and Santa made the decision to militarize the operation, and that spoke of his own pride. And that was why he wasn't willing to hang it up when he'd been Santa for 70 years and was losing his step a bit and was missing kids.
Oh, it doesn't. Even if they do see it, you just a whack on the head with a sock full of oranges and a dab of whiskey on the lips. They don't remember in the morning.
So, and there's something compelling about the idea of two sons competing for inheritance. But I think right at the heart of it is the idea that every child is important. And we had Steve who was willing to be like, it's just a rounding error.
Yeah.
That's no big deal.
It's an efficiency error of 0.00159%.
And the idea that one child could be missed was a great example of the ethic of if one person's not important, then no one is. And it gave the elves a complete crisis.
The elves were so well written because they're so good at what they do, but they're also all kind of idiots.
Yeah, they're like the little yellow minions. They're just carrying out a task, but they're not leaders.
And they kept asking Santa, it's like, does one child, one child was missed? Was one child missed? And they were all super important about it. It's like, it's just one child. That doesn't matter. Wait, so one child?
One child doesn't matter?
Yeah. So wait, which child doesn't matter? Because I've got two childs in Germany. Do they matter? I've got two children that are twins. And then some other elf looked at me like, they don't matter, half each.
Yeah,
they were just taking like everything that the clauses said was just taken to this total logical extreme, and they were so the elves were just great. Like when they thought that Santa Clauses were leaving, they hit the meltdown button. They all went into a blind panic, running and screaming in different directions.
Self-destruct in 10 minutes.
Yes, that was awesome.
Yeah, well, and that gets into my Jeers list. I mean, like I said, the Arthur of being the hapless klutz. I mean, I get the hapless klutz trope, but it just gets old. Tripping on everything and messing everything up and falling on everything. Is that really a character flaw, being a hapless klutz? Are we still don't question that in cinema?
Yeah, they're trying to establish him as like the underdog, so you feel good when he triumphs. But I get what you're saying.
I get it.
They might have pushed that a little too far.
Yeah. The magic still doesn't scale to the problem. It's the uncanny valley of Christmas. In trying to answer every single thing on the list, they prove that you still can't.
Well, let's be absolutely clear here, Ben. Yes, the logistical problem of delivering 2 billion packages in one night is insurmountable with currently known technology, which is where the magic comes in.
Okay. Well, good. That's what I'm getting to, because I had a bunch. It also kind of felt like one of the knockoff movies that they did in the early 2000s, like Not Another Teen Movie, Not Another Scary Movie, those kinds of things, where it's just, instead of making an actual movie, they just made a movie that was just reminded you of things. Mm-hmm. There was a point where I started making a list of things they were just reminding us. Like they returned on Christmas and there were a couple of elves kissing, and it was supposed to be the famous Navy ship kiss from World War II. Or there was Santa got back and they had a big mission accomplished banner behind him that was supposed to be reminiscent of George Bush on the aircraft carrier after Desert Storm, or the washed up old man who won't retire, or the guy in the junkyard who looked like there was an alien abduction. I mean, just on and on and on and on and on and on.
I get that. There's a lot of references and a lot of callbacks, but you have to admit this has to be one of the most unique Christmas movies you've seen.
Yeah, yes, it was. I'd give it 50-50. I won't go through the whole rest of my list about the things I didn't like. But
you have more jeers? You're going to hurt my feelings, man.
This felt like a 90-minute movie that should have been a 60-minute movie, and the extra 30 minutes was like all the just zany, manic action. They would sit around and talk for 2 minutes, and then something crazy would happen, and then fly around for 2 minutes and repeat.
Are you going to be this down on every Christmas movie we review today?
Sir, the kids are getting bored. We need another chase. All right, go. It's like, you know what? This is what happens when you unleash the Aardman folks on CGI, and they don't have the limitations of sitting and having to mess around with little pieces of clay for weeks on end. Like, if they had that, they'd be like, okay, we need to cut this action scene back. I'm serious. It was them not having limitations and suffering because of it.
I'm flabbergasted because I enjoy that movie so much, and you're tearing it to pieces in front of me. I'm so sad.
The whole thing happened at night. The lighting was always perfect.
Of all the nitpicks, holy crap! You're very meta about this, aren't you?
Yeah.
You really can't enjoy just a good Christmas movie, can you?
Okay, this one was about 50-50 of things that annoyed me and things that I was really charmed by. So I'd watch it. I wouldn't refuse to watch it again, unlike other movies on our list.
Okay.
So let's
cut to the rating. Let's cut to the meat here. So hard versus soft.
So we both agree that it's a soft magic system.
Definitely a soft magic system. I think most Christmas movies are going to be soft magic.
And then how well did it follow the 3 laws, as in Rattle Moth?
Author's ability to solve a conflict with magic. How well we understand the magic. I think they did an excellent job in this movie. They said these are the capabilities of the clauses and the elves and the technology, and this is how the problem was solved. I think they did a great job with that. Don't miss.
I gave it a low rating, but I can't defend it that well, because really what I was thinking about is the problem, the central conflict of the movie. There were too many central conflicts in the movie. There was the old guy that didn't want to hang it up. There was the even older guy that wanted to prove that his day was better. There was the guy that wanted to become the successor but didn't have the right motivation for it. And then there was our hero that we rooted for all along.
Right, but you're talking about story points. We're not talking about what we're talking about here. We're rating the magic system.
But we had too many protagonists. Okay, but the point of the magic system is in meeting the Santa problem, as we established earlier. And it failed because one kid was missed. That was the whole point. That was the whole plot of the movie. One kid was missed.
But at the end of the movie, that kid woke up and had the present from Santa Claus.
Okay, well, yes, and it wasn't solved because of magic. It was solved because of the tenaciousness of Arthur.
Okay.
So I guess by that, okay. I'll give it a B on its ability to adhere to the 3 laws.
I'm giving it an A+ for rule number 1. I wasn't giving for all of them, but limitations are more interesting than its capabilities.
I'm downgrading it by a full letter grade solely for the fact that they tried to say that they definitively answered all of the problems, and in doing that, they showed that you can't.
That's going to be a base assumption of every Christmas movie. For law number 1, I'm giving it an A+. Law number 2, limitations versus capabilities, I'm giving it a B- just for the one line about the magic dust and the reindeer being able to go Mach 7 and going into outer space. Oh, crap, the reindeer went to outer space. Okay. All right, for number 2, they get a C+.
Like, unless we pull them down, they're going to keep on going.
Oh, crap. Okay, no, all right. So number 2, they get a B- for limitations. 3, expand on what you have before you add something new. I got to give them a C+ on this one because the reindeer did go to space at the end to resolve the conflict if they didn't know how to get to England.
So you gave them an aggregate B?
An aggregate somewhere in a B range, yeah.
Okay, me too.
Excellent. All right, what movie do you want to talk about now, Ben?
Let's go to Nightmare Before Christmas.
This is the first time you've watched Nightmare Before Christmas, is that right?
It was, yes. And we've established that I've deliberately avoided it because I was averse to it.
So this is a weird thing about claymated movies like this one. There was one called just the number 9. Coraline is another claymated movie. I don't know what it is, but this genre, this style of claymation just kind of speaks to me for some reason. I like watching them. Just something about the way that the characters and the scenery and everything moves. I enjoy it and I appreciate it. But that doesn't mean to say that they're good movies. For example, Coraline is a horrifying movie, and I don't recommend anybody watch that.
Yeah, my daughter Kaya was saying that too. She's like, that movie's really scary.
I watched that movie as a grown man in my late 20s, and I had nightmares. That movie is legitimately terrifying. Do not watch that movie.
Okay, but you're saying Nightmare Before Christmas is not.
Nightmare Before Christmas was interesting in that, like, so where Coraline looked like an innocent movie that was incredibly frightening, Nightmare Before Christmas on the cover looks incredibly frightening and is actually very, very charming.
So, Tim Burton, the director of Nightmare Before Christmas, has a storied career for which he's kind of famous of basically doing the same thing. He's like Wes Anderson in that, yeah, he's going to do movies that have different sounding plots, but the product that he produces is generally pretty samey.
You can say that about a lot of different filmmakers in the world today.
Some people make a bigger effort to have variety in what they produce. But, Tim Burton has paired with Danny Elfman, the composer of the music for The Nightmare Before Christmas, 16 times.
I mean, yeah.
That's more storied than like Steven Spielberg and John Williams. I mean, that's just, it's always the same kind of sound and the same kind of feel, just this dark, slightly off, a bit macabre. From Batman to Beetlejuice to this, it's all just kind of the same. And I knew that I don't really like that anymore. I've just decided I'm not much into the Tim Burton shtick, which is why I was avoiding it.
So, yes, this movie screams Tim Burton. The mise-en-scène of the whole thing, start to finish, is very Tim Burton, from the character design to the lighting and the scenery choices and just honestly, the way everything is just designed. Santa Claus has freakishly tiny feet in this movie, for no other reason than because it's a Tim Burton movie.
And just because it looks creepy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just off-putting enough to make you know.
So, if you were a producer trying to describe the mise-en-scène of this movie, what would you call it?
I would call it a Tim Burton movie. Like, that's what it is.
I wrote down comfortable hometown horror.
Comfortable hometown horror. I like that.
Because it felt like it was set in the Halloween town, and it was just the adventure of the mayor and the king. I didn't understand the relationship there of trying to have our midlife crisis together.
I don't think the mayor was not having the midlife crisis. I think the mayor exists solely to take care of the bureaucracy and the day-to-day nonsense, whereas the king, being Jack Skellington, sets the direction, the overall vision and execution of his master plan.
Okay.
So, all right, to do a plot, do you want to do a plot synopsis of this?
No, you do it. You do it better than me.
Okay. So for this one, we open up to Halloween night in Halloween Town, in this claymated world, where Jack Skellington is the king of Halloween, and he is...
Okay, I got to stop you, though. Where does Halloween Town exist in relation to...
Oh, no.
Is this supposed to be like a parallel universe to Human World?
We're not there yet. We will get there. Yeah, this is some place that exists
go ahead. Sorry,
in the universe called Halloween Town. And we see Jack Skellington at the top of his game, flawlessly orchestrating and executing a Halloween that is perfectly terrifying and encompasses all the different things that could possibly freak you out about Halloween, and it's done very well. There's a big musical number, and it's riveting, and it's great. And at the end of it, he walks off into the night, sad and depressed because it was just like last year and the year before that. What we see, the plot of this movie becomes a person who is at the peak of their game, like just getting it done, and it's just flawless every time. And for some reason, he doesn't know, he's unsatisfied with his life and just doesn't, and he wants something more. And there's some hole in him that he doesn't know how to fill, and he's struggling with that emotional conflict. And somehow he wanders off into the distance and comes up to this weird circle of trees that go to different holiday towns.
Yeah, they're very obvious from the outside of the tree what holiday they go to, even though it doesn't tell us. I like the show don't tell aspect of this film.
Yes. He stumbles into this, who knows where this forest of trees was, but he falls literally into...
He doesn't know what St. Patrick's Day and St. Valentine's Day and Easter and Christmas are, but the one with the shiny tree covered in baubles looks appealing to him, and he opens that door and goes through it.
Gets sucked into Christmas Town, and they're in full tilt for getting ready for Christmas, and he is just enchanted by everything that's there, and he decides, this is what I'm doing. This is mine now. Thank you for all of this. And he orchestrates he goes back to Halloween Town where his troops are and says, we're doing Christmas, and nobody gets it. Like he felt the magic, and it entered his heart, and he felt so enriched and warm and lovey, and nobody gets it. And so he's telling them we're going to do Christmas, and they're basically doing Halloween flavored Christmas, and he's just trying to drive into them. This isn't quite there.
Yeah, it sounds like a great pitch from, to an executive producer. Like, it's like Christmas, but Halloween Christmas.
It's like if he took all of the horrible things about Halloween and told them to do their version of Christmas, and that's what happened. And so really what we have, the whole plot, is Jack Skellington's midlife crisis and him unable to recognize and realize that this is going to go horribly wrong for a lot of people, but he just wanted it so bad.
And I think there's something important here. The idea that a people that had only ever done one thing one way would try to understand this foreign newness through their own lens and experience. That's a good lesson.
That's very true to what actually happens in real life. Like, it's that whole saying, like when you train somebody to be a hammer, they start seeing the world as nails. It's just like your perspective and your experiences will give you inherent bias on how you approach problems.
Now, this whole shtick of there's somebody among us that we accept as part of us, but they're a bit off because they're kind of macabre and spooky, has been done first and better, like the Addams Family from, back in black and white TV days.
Who are you referring to specifically in this movie? Just the whole Halloween town in general?
The whole thing. Oh, the whole thing. Just a whole town full of people that it's kind of loony. It's not threatening Halloween. It's just silly, even though it's about death and being afraid and haunting and those kinds of things. It's not actually threatening. It's just spooky.
Yeah, and the scariest characters that are in it just come across as normal people, just trying to do their job.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bit of a workmanship to it, with the exception of like the little kids that their identity is being very mischievous.
Yeah, the trick-or-treaters. Those three kids are genuinely evil. Like, those three kids are probably the most evil children I've ever seen.
We're going to make an alignment chart here. They were chaotic evil.
Oh, not just... Like, how did they even get there? It feels like these three kids are so evil that they stumbled into Halloween Town.
Trick or treat.
No.
Trick.
They showed up into Halloween Town, and the Halloween Town's people made them live in a tree outside of town with the boogeyman.
Yeah, no, you guys are too chaotic for this place.
You three are psychos. You go live outside of town. Yes, we have zombies and werewolves, but you're just ridiculous.
All right, so let me ask the obvious question that maybe some people ask. I don't remember. If when this came out, there was like a Harry Potter style controversy where like good Christian moms said, how dare they commercialize the sanctity of the holy holiday of Christmas with this
Tim Burton
horrible
ridiculousness.
Tim Burton ridiculous. Maybe that happened. I don't know if it did or not, or if it just kind of somehow flew under that radar. But why is this considered a kid-friendly movie? Why?
Well, nobody dies in this movie. It's a claymated movie, so in America, claymated movies are for kids.
I mean, there was the kind of silly, scary stuff. The clown with the tearaway face, the moon shadow. Everything was kind of low stakes. They were earnestly trying to make Christmas fun, but in the worst possible way. But then there was some genuinely macabre stuff. I mean, there was Guillotine Boy. There's creepy mad scientist father that kind of has vibes of like incestuous weirdo, trying to poison your father to death and chop him into bits. I mean, there was like some really gruesomeness to it.
I honestly, when I saw this as a kid, I wasn't bothered by anything until the boogeyman. Like at the end of the movie, he gets his whole cloth sack torn away and he's made of insects. That genuinely freaked me out as a kid.
Well, not just that, but everyone else is just kind of, like you said, going about Halloween like it's their job, but the boogeyman isn't. He's like genuinely evil. If we're making an alignment chart here, most people aren't in the evil column.
I was never clear in the movie if he's locked in that basement that he lives in or if he chooses to stay there away from everyone else. Like, it's never... Is that his prison? Are they keeping him separate? Like, I never could get that.
So unlike Arthur Christmas, this film felt like it only had a single protagonist. Everybody else was just an antagonist surrounding Jack Skellington coping with his midlife crisis of not feeling fulfilled in his purpose for existence.
We also had our zombie love interest. What was her... was that Sally?
Sally,
the kind of Frankenstein
like
monster.
Frankenstein scarecrow kind of thing.
I like Sally as kind of the
sure, but she doesn't change.
No,
she's just an antagonist to Jack.
Got it. Okay, yeah, Jack is our protagonist.
Yes,
and you got to admit when he gets shot down out of Santa's sleigh and sings that song, "What Have I Done," in the graveyard, that was a great turning point for a character. You really felt like he resolved his internal conflict in the span of like 3 minutes.
Okay, let's talk about the music for a minute. Because amongst these 5 films, one of them has genuinely great magic. One of them has kind of derivative classics. One, I think, doesn't have any music at all. I said magic, I meant music. Okay. This one had an attempt to kind of create some music, but it all just suffered. Like, there aren't catchy Halloween songs. You don't want to sing them. I didn't like the music. I didn't like it.
Oh.
There was not a single one of those songs was like catchy or repeatable. I didn't find myself singing it later.
Oh, come on.
They're not memorable.
You weren't humming Kidnap Mr. Santa Claus the rest of the day?
No, it felt like Les Miserables, where they were just singing words instead of actually performing a song.
So you might find this interesting, but years and years later, they've actually re-released, like, very popular, like, rock artists have come out and created this soundtrack again. Like, I want to say, like, Disturbed and Marilyn Manson and Korn are all part of this album where they redid all of these songs. I get it
because they've made their living on this same kind of shtick of, like, a harmless yet you know, somewhat threatening.
It's a very goth Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? This. I'm going to interrupt right now, and I'm going to ask you. This is the debate that goes on about this movie since it came out. Is this a Halloween movie or is this a Christmas movie?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, that's such a non-committal answer.
Okay. I'll here's why I asked. Does it matter? Because there's no consequences to anything in here. You know, they're like macabre, but nobody dies. Everyone's immortal.
Because they're more embodiments of ideas, is the way I took it.
Its most redeeming quality was it was mercifully short, and again, I attribute that to the difficulty of producing film of claymation.
Okay, fair enough. So we have a Santa Claus that's kidnapped. Jack tries to do Halloween, Christmas. It's a nightmare. The Nightmare Before Christmas. Haha. And then we have Jack then realizes the error of his ways and goes to free Santa Claus so he can fix everything. And that's kind of like the only acknowledgement we get to Christmassy type magic is when somebody asks Santa when they save him, like, are you going to have enough time? And he goes, of course I am. I'm Santa Claus, and literally flies off into the sky and then takes care of everything.
So I think it's good that we started with Father Christmas and did this one because this is just the opposite end of the spectrum of, are we going to sit down and acknowledge every item on the list and try to address every single one? I think the filmmakers for this one just realized that that's a fruitless exercise and just blew it off.
Yep. They kind of eliminated all of the baggage of having to explain the magic and the logistic problem of Christmas in order to tell the story they wanted to tell.
Yeah. I mean, there were some interesting artistic things that were happening. Like, even though Jack ultimately abandoned his quest to commandeer Christmas, at the end, when he returned to Halloween, there was slightly more color in everything.
Oh, that is a good point. I don't think I recognized that when I saw the film.
Yeah. And I think that's the part we're supposed to be able to take away is like, well, yeah, he got a bit of an identity crisis, but then he was able to undertake his purpose for existence with a new bit of zeal and variety.
Right. And so he resolved his midlife crisis and then went back and rededicated himself to what he was best at and felt a revived passion for it. But the real question is that I have, because I need to have this question answered before I have another midlife crisis. Did he have to try something new and fail in order to recognize this? Or would he have recognized it eventually anyway without having to destroy Christmas?
I hate to break it to you, Josh, but I think he had to do the other thing and fail.
Oh, that does hurt.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm going to chalk up my entire career as a pool guy to my midlife crisis.
Yeah. I mean, there was... Okay, so here's the thing. So when I was looking at this, you know, where everyone is just completely cartoony and it doesn't even feel like it's supposed to map onto the real world. It was just some alternate universe. Like the question I asked you at the beginning, where is this place?
Yeah, and my problem with that is Jack somehow fell asleep and was walking through the woods and showed up at the Nexus where presumably if he had gone through the pumpkin door, he'd end up back in his hometown. Yeah.
If it was in the Marvel universe, this would have been the place where Heimdall has the sword.
Yes, this. I don't think it's a real place that exists. This has to be some kind of parallel dimension where the ideas of holidays have manifested into real things.
As far as I can tell, that's the only actual magic that exists in this.
Well, then there's
'Cause
the whole magic of Santa Claus and the flying reindeer and all of it.
But they didn't bother to try to explain any of that.
No, they didn't. We have
magic was there to just add whimsy, but it wasn't really the point.
Right. All of this was just the softest of soft magic.
At its heart, this was just, like you said, a man resolving his midlife crisis. So I don't know what to say about magic in this movie.
Well, magic existed. It was, like you said, secondary to the main story. And if we break it down with Sanderson's laws, it kind of fails on every front.
Yeah, they weren't using magic to tell or resolve the conflict.
Well, they did. The conflict, the secondary conflict, I guess, was Christmas was destroyed by Halloween freaks, and Santa Claus just fixed it in 6 seconds. So
yeah,
no consequences because Santa's got it in the bag, so to speak.
Right. Exactly. The magic just didn't matter.
Yeah. So yeah, it kind of fails. Like, if we're going to rate this movie, I still think it's a decent movie. As a movie, I'm going to give it like a B. For the magic system, I've got to give it like a low C. Probably a D.
Yeah. So I'd say it's soft magic, and for the magic system, I gave it an E because that doesn't make sense. as the magic system in this movie doesn't make sense.
It just kind of is there, never explained, and it resolved the conflict perfectly with no explanations.
Right. It's not really used to tell the story. The magic system is unrelated to the conflict in the story.
I still like the story, though.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't really give this like a letter grade overall. In just other than when I ranked the 5, it was very low in my rankings as far as my desire to watch it again.
Yeah, it is another one of those films that's very unique when it comes to Christmas movies.
Okay, so we've talked about Arthur Christmas. We've talked about Night Before Christmas. You picked the next one.
Let's talk about The Santa Claus with an E.
Okay, so that was the one I picked, and I was surprised you'd never seen it before.
I think I had seen it, but it had been years and years and years. You give the plot synopsis on this one.
Okay, so The Santa Claus came out in the mid-'90s at the peak of Tim Allen's popularity as the host of Home Improvement.
Man, I asked you for a plot synopsis, and you started with this most meta commentary about this movie you can. Like, you have no concept of how to tell a story, do you?
It's the equivalent in like if you're a recording artist and you're having a successful career, then you know that you're really cashing in when you come out with a Christmas album. And this is the equivalent of that for a stand-up comedian. You know you're having a successful career as a stand-up comedian when you get your own Christmas movie. So Tim Allen got his Christmas movie, and it just felt like a pull-it-off-the-shelf plot. What if some schmuck who's living... It's very similar to Elf in that he has a job in the toy industry where he's supposed to be making the dreams and wishes of children come true, and yet in a very commercialized, impersonal way, so that it's actually detached and he's not even making the dreams of his own child come true. And he's kind of turned into a corporate, soulless suit. And then one night, he accidentally kills Santa Claus. And in putting on Santa Claus's red suit in the course of the zany action that ensues, he activates what's known as the Santa Clause, Clause, in that he has now voluntarily become the successor to Santa Claus, and our protagonist has become Santa Claus.
Due to peer pressure from his, 5 or 6-year-old child, no less?
Yes.
Like, that's the worst.
It was very well cast, I might add.
I don't know. I don't like most child actors, and I don't think that kid did very good. He felt very...
I loved him.
He felt very flat the whole movie.
He was just cute and appropriate for what he needed to do there in the movie. Stick his lower lip out and beg his dad for the things that he wanted, and sometimes be sad and sometimes be overjoyed.
Oh, come on, Dad. Climb up to the roof and get in the sleigh. Come on, Dad. Put on the dead guy's pants. Like, there's a point, like, as a parent, you're like, no, I'm not putting on the corpse's pants. Get back in the house. I'm calling the cops.
So back to my metacommentary. I mean, this film was so successful that it spawned 2 ill-advised sequels. I think the third of which I have not seen.
Yeah, no, I can't believe this movie has any sequels.
But, well, I mean, they did. It's funny because in these 5 movies, I made a table of all of the Christmas tropes that each one addresses. And the only one that is an X in every single column is this movie, except for one thing: Mrs. Claus. Mrs. Claus is completely absent from and not addressed in this movie. Guess what the second movie's about?
I'm gonna, based on your tone and inflection, I'm gonna guess that it's about Mrs. Claus.
Santa Claus 2, The Mrs. Claus. Clause. So yes.
So this was back in the day of direct to VHS sequels. I hope that's what that was.
No, that one went to theaters. The third one might have, but anyway, here's the thing. It was a comedian at the height of his comedic powers, and the shtick he had where he was like taking the Mickey out on the stepdad had me rolling. Like him making psychiatrist jokes on the stepdad was freaking hilarious. I was laughing so hard. I could sit and watch Tim Allen make psychiatrist jokes all day, and I counted 8 at least.
So I do like Tim Allen as a comedian as well. I grew up watching I want to say Tool Time, but that's not what the actual show was. Home Improvement.
Yeah, Home Improvement.
Yeah. No, Tim Allen is great, and I like him as a comedian. But this movie was hard to watch. I think when it first started, I'm like, ooh, this movie's pretty dated. And like my kids had never seen it, obviously. And so we watched it all together as a family. And when they showed the sleigh for the first time flying, my son started laughing so hard. I'm like,
the CG is laughably bad.
It is so bad. And my son...
Well, I think they were aware of this, that they were stretching them, either their abilities or their budget. And they only show it for a few seconds. Like, they don't linger on it.
Oh, no, but there's a couple of times where they had to do the CGI. Or just even, like, there's a part where the elves they're clearly on the hip harness cables. And they have to go flying off into the night. And they just pan away on a green screen just a little too fast. And my 9-year-old son's like, oh, man, this is so fake. And I'm like, kid, this was the best we had in the mid-90s.
How much have we changed, Because I remember looking at it back in the 90s and going, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah, is that just an expectations or what exists in the universe?
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, maybe. But no, watching it this last week, dude, that CGI is just gross.
So one thing I got to say for them in this film is they were always swinging for the fences. And sometimes it's a huge miss. Like some of the things were just really bad, but some of them really hit.
This movie, you said Arthur Christmas was a 90-minute movie that should have been 60 minutes. This movie should have been 60 minutes.
I won't deny that.
Yeah, there just isn't enough here. It's like, yes.
There's the standard broken family plot, that we've seen too many times before, where dad's a liar who hasn't learned from his divorce, but he still loves his child, and Charlie prefers the new family, and that's kind of the opening, like, Mom, don't leave me here for Christmas. It's Dad's weekend, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They end up going out for dinner, and
then the kid then the kid ends up having legitimate psychiatric problems when he witnesses his father become Santa Claus. And like, that's a terrifying thing as a parent. Like, oh, I let you have my kid for one day and now he will not shut up about you being Santa Claus.
So here's the thing I want to point out about this film, Josh, I think was kind of deliberate. And that is, at one point, he has the kid for the night. The waitress at Denny's name was
Judy,
and that also was the name of the chief elf at the North Pole. Yeah. And there was a lot of other parallels like that. And I think that they kind of are playing off the idea almost like in A Christmas Carol, where he wakes up the next morning and it may or may not have actually happened.
It could have all been a dream.
Which would have been fine if it only involved one person.
Yes.
But the fact that it also involved Charlie really made it just messy and complicated and not play out well.
Well, and so that also goes out the window when my son, again, 9-year-old son, pointed out that, like, oh, was it all just a dream while we were watching this movie? But then the comforter falls away and Tim Allen's wearing those silk red pajamas that he was not wearing the night before. My son goes, oh, it really happened. Yeah.
So of these 5 movies, 3 of them, the protagonist wakes up the next morning and wonders if it was all just a dream.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a thing apparently with this genre.
Well, if you were an adult and you had an elaborate hallucination of delivering, like, how many toys did he have to deliver, Ben? How long did that take?
Yeah, he did the whole night.
That's not a
whatever.
All right, so I've had some dreams that felt very real at the time, but the next morning, it is clear by miles that it was a dream and it was not real. So
All right.
I've never been subjected to this idea, or I never like bought into the idea that you could have a weird experience in real life and then somehow think it was a dream after the fact.
Yes, yes, and it really bugs me, but I don't know that writers are good at figuring out how to actually deal with this. I started a timer on this because it annoys me when movies do this. You have a protagonist, they get thrown into some exceptional magical circumstance, and instead of trying to assimilate the information, they spend an inordinate amount of time in denial.
Yeah.
This isn't really happening. This isn't true. This can't be like this. They're flying through the air. There's magic everywhere. They're at the North Pole. There's elves. There's toys. There's castles. It occupies the whole night. All this stuff is happening, and they're still sitting around going, I can't believe this. This can't be true. This can't be happening. Another magical thing happens, and they go, that can't be happening. And after a while, I just get annoyed at it. Like, come on, man. Just start assimilating the new information. I think it's like they feel that they, I don't know, are... Why do they do that?
Because I think, like, so imagine, I actually thought about this while I was watching this movie. It's like, if this was happening to me, would I be doing the same kind of hardcore denial shtick?
Right. At one point, do you actually start actively trying to assimilate the new information instead of continuously denying it?
But here's the thing. I realized that if I was experiencing the things that Tim Allen was experiencing, I would be torn between either this can't be true or I've gone completely insane. Like, because all experience that I've had for my entire life up to this point completely negates and says nothing that is happening right now can ever remotely have ever existed. So I've either had so there's the three options. Either this is not happening, not real, and then everything that I know and understand about myself and the world is still true, which is the easiest to digest psychologically. Or there is, like you said, something out in the universe that exists that I don't understand, that I have never experienced up to this point, which you would immediately assume is a very low probability because you would have experienced something like this before. Or you have gone completely insane and you can't trust a single thing you hear, see, touch, or smell anymore. So,
but again, even if that's true, what's the point of resisting it?
And this is the thing, like, for the sake of my own, if it was me in Tim Allen's spot, I think I would deny it for an inordinate amount of time too, for no other reason than I don't want to be insane, and the probability of this being real is so low that it's more likely that this isn't happening.
Okay, maybe that's what yields to that kind of writing. Okay, so so he wakes up in his bed having been Santa Claus the night before. Like, he went to all of the houses and delivered we don't know how many Santa had delivered by the time he got to their house. Maybe he only had to do half of the job.
Maybe Cleveland was the last place Santa goes to
he finished the job, and he said something to the effect of, wow, that was a lot of houses we had to go to. I can't believe we did all that. And then he wakes up the next morning in those silky pajamas with SC on it, which just happened to actually be his initials anyway, since his name was Scott Calvin. But there is an underlying fable here in this broken dad kind of thing that was really kind of sad. It's the mom got remarried, you're still alone, you're you're not a good dad, you're not really connecting with your son, and he'd rather be with them. And so now you're trying to compete for her and the new stepdad's love by being more fun. And you've decided the way to do that is in perpetuating the Santa Claus myth that everyone knows is fake.
Yes, and that was kind of the shtick of the movie, is Santa's not real, but I'm going to buy in super hardcore because that's the one thing I can do to associate with my son better. And then when he actually ends up becoming the Santa Claus, unbeknownst to everybody except him and his son, it seems like a psychotic break to everyone from the outside.
It really does. And that could be like the how it should have ended version of this movie, where he actually has just gone completely crazy.
Yes, because if you saw him months later and he had dyed his hair white and grown a full beard and put on 100 pounds, you would start to think that he was completely insane.
Yeah, and they started trying to cope with that. Like, they did this one scene at his work where he was in a board meeting and he's overeating and talking too much, and it was just uncomfortable and terrible.
Yes, it was. He's like in sweats or whatever. It's like, all my suits at the dry cleaners went bad or whatever. It's like,
yeah, and he's just telling lie after lie after lie to try to explain all this. Yeah, it was not good.
And honestly, in a really cutthroat corporate America, like if I was the boss, it would be irresponsible for me not to call him into the office. Like, dude, you put on 80 pounds in a week. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm paying you a lot of money to be psychologically sound, and you are not.
They kind of did that.
You didn't get fired.
I don't know. I mean, fat shaming wasn't named yet, but they were definitely flirting with it.
They also don't address the fact that he disappeared from the real world at, Thanksgiving? Like he was abducted to the North Pole to get Santa training? Like, did he lose his job? Who's paying his rent? There are a lot of bills going unanswered at this time.
So this movie was kind of schizophrenic, and there was those movies where it was just kind of flat, and the ideas weren't hitting, and then there were ones where it was really poignant. Like I said about how there was this fable about the struggle that happens when families get broken and reconstituted. There was also a scene early on where, before he'd become Santa Claus, when his kid was like, Charlie, sometimes believing in something means you just believe in it. And Charlie goes, you believe in Santa, right, Dad? And he goes, of course I believe in Santa. Charlie wants to believe, and then if Santa doesn't exist and they've just had this discussion, it's very similar to everyone's experience with the Santa myth. But then the movie goes off the rails in that he actually does exist, and then they try doing the thing where they got to answer all of all the list of the Santa problem. So now, reindeer fly and a chimneys appear where there weren't one, and this magic bag is like a hole in the space-time continuum where you just pull anything out of it. Time doesn't matter. It's all about believing, and I don't even know.
Matt, based on the description you just gave, it sounds like what you wanted the Santa Claus to be an hour and a half of Tim Allen having a real heart-to-heart discussion over a dinner table with his 6-year-old son about what faith means.
This movie had a lot of charms. I would say it had about a 2-to-1 charm to annoyance ratio.
You see, I'm the other way around on that. Like, for every time that I felt like, oh, that's cute, there was 2 other times where I was rolling my eyes like, oh, kill me now.
I think that's why we make a good host and co-host of this program. The pun in the title, little touches like the fact that the ladder on the side of the house was the rose such a clatter.
Why? We wasted 30 seconds on a bad pun. Like, I love dad jokes. I love dad jokes. But the rose such a ladder company, like, just kill me. Come on.
Tim Allen, he wasn't playing a character. He was just himself in the grand tradition of comedians playing themselves in Disney movies, a la Robin Williams as the genie or Eddie Murphy as Mushu in Mulan. He was just him.
Yeah, you can't cast Tim Allen and ask him not to grunt on the movie at some point.
And I can't remember when he did, but I'm pretty sure.
Oh, he said that. That was his ho ho ho. It was ho 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 after he delivered all the toys.
Nice. Good job remembering that. Here's one I want to say that is, I thought that in this movie exceeded the others. Every other iteration of elves in these movies was creepy. In this one, I liked it.
They were all children. That makes it way creepier than other elves.
They were children with old souls, and they spoke like old souls.
I don't know. There was Bernard, who was legitimately taller and older and even more fed up with Christmas than all of the other old elves were.
I liked it. I like this way the best, other than them just being like creepy, tiny people that of uncertain origin. They were
just hard no, because there was creepy sexual tension between Tim Allen and Judy the elf when she gave him the pajamas. Like, he almost asked her out, and she had to tell him, I have a boyfriend. Like, that's just too much. In any movie where an 8-year-old girl has to tell a full-grown man, I have a boyfriend, there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, it had an obligation to tick all the boxes of Santa lore, and it did. There was the milk and cookies thing, but don't finish all the milk. There was the gray hair and the beard, and he became a jolly old elf. I love the scene when he's at the doctor, and the doctor is listening to his heart, and it plays Jingle Bells.
Which, okay, thank you for bringing that up. Worst doctor ever, by the way.
You're like, dude, lay down. I'm calling the ambulance.
Yeah, seriously. I don't know what's going on, but you need to see a cardiologist right now.
Stat.
Yes,
That's time for the
that's
word
time for
stat.
stat. It's like,
As bad as the CGI was, the makeup was good. Like he really looked like the gray hair and beard and
yeah, the
fat,
fat
and it
suit
was
was
good.
legit. Like, he did seem like he was a chunky guy.
I, I, I liked Sarah the Elf, aside from the creepy sexual thing you had to bring up. The Santa crime lineup cracked me up, where they brought in a room full of like Santa impersonators and asked her which one it was that kidnapped her son.
I asked my wife during this movie, where is this town? Because I want to move there. I want to move to the town where a child is abducted and the entire police force then goes on a crusade arresting every Santa Claus they see for the tiny possibility that it's the guy who abducted this child.
Yeah, as opposed to just looking for the person
There
did it.
must be absolutely no crime in this town whatsoever, and 600 people in the police force.
Yeah. There was this ongoing joke of the stepdad wearing like these ridiculously hideous sweaters. Could not get enough of that. I lost count of how many terrible sweaters he wore, but it was
You
fantastic.
see, that to me, that was a bad point, because that is, all right, how do you make a character in a story? It's like, oh, we have to have a person that says words. Okay, but they just seem like a cardboard cutout. What makes them a person? We'll make him wear terrible sweaters, and that's his whole identity. And so it's like, I don't know. I feel like they just had that character as a cardboard cutout, and they needed to have one thing to justify his existence as a real person.
Yes, but like I said, this broken family competing for the love of a child thing has been done a million times in a movie. And is that character ever well developed? The other person,
The one that you're supposed to hate as the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
So there were other annoyances. This was the only movie of the 5 with fart jokes in it, and I can just do without that.
They cut the hinges off of a jail cell with tinsel with no explanation.
There was a minute there where Tim Allen's standing around just making up ridiculous lies about all the stupid stuff that's happening, and he sounded like Jim Carrey in Liar Liar, and I thought, he should have just left that to Jim Carrey, and I looked it up, and this movie actually came out
predates
4 years before that one.
Very much predates Liar Liar.
So I guess Liar Liar was channeling Tim Allen in Santa Claus when they came up with that.
All right, I didn't like this movie at all. Let's grade it and move on, because terrible
Okay.
movie. Hard versus soft magic, the softest of soft magics. They had tinsel that cut through steel with no explanation. Like,
Okay, but here's how we rate hard or soft. It's in like knowing the rules of the system, right?
if the magic system is clear and understood by the audience.
Okay, what about the title? It's called The Santa Claus. That feels like it was clear and understood.
Wait, are we? So wait.
It was written out like a contract.
But we're throwing away the immortal old elves that live under the North Pole. We're throwing out the polar bear that's directing traffic. We're throwing out.
All right, but if we're not going to haggle over this, are all these movies just soft magic?
Yes, I think they are.
All right, okay.
But you want to say it's hard magic. You want to say the clause itself was hard magic in that he had to fulfill the contract.
Yes, but maybe that's just one of the 3 rules. That's one of the limitations.
So, I mean, if we could do that, we could abstract out all the Santa. If we take all the Christmas magic and abstract that away and look at just the focus of the movie, then it becomes Nightmare Before Christmas didn't have any. Arthur Christmas didn't really have any. That wasn't pertinent to the plot. The magic that was pertinent to the plot here was the contractual clause.
Was a regular person being basically contracted into gaining all of the magic of Santa.
So I feel like then, so it's a hard magic system, but it's kind of BS. First of all, you can't fit all the proper verbiage you need for a binding contract, onto a business card.
A border of a business card.
Second, when Bernard asked him, "Did you read the card?" Yes. Did you put on the suit after you read the card? Yes. That shouldn't be binding. He clearly doesn't know what he's getting himself into. I think you would be sued over that.
Yeah. Who do you sue?
Comcast. I think you sued Comcast for this one.
Okay, let's go on to the 3 rules.
Okay. Solve the conflict in the movie with the magic. Was the conflict just that he was a psychopath that didn't think he was Santa but ended up being Santa anyway?
I don't know. In the end, just it was about his ex-wife accepting him and his son loving him again.
He completely rejected the fact that he was turning into Santa Claus until he shook that magic snow globe that Charlie gave him, and he saw the little animation, and then his character changed 180 degrees. You're right. everything that happened to me in that night was real, and I just need to completely embrace this in the best way possible. I say no. That's ridiculous. Nobody has ever changed their whole personality that way, that fast, ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Limitations more interesting than the capabilities. No.
Yeah.
We're just pulling stuff out of a hat. Like, oh, he got arrested. What do? We get the jetpack elves with unexplained magical tools to go save him.
Yeah, special. I don't know what to say. Special ops elves coming out of nowhere and just being charming, but looking like they're on wire harnesses.
That was just like, why? Why do we even? Never mind. Like, I just groaned the whole time those elves were on screen. I'm
okay.
shocked that they were not shot out of the sky by police officers.
Because these are the hapless cops that were just lining up mall Santas to see if it was one of them was kidnapped the child.
Yeah. Expand.
Like it was a murder instead of a kidnapping.
Expand on what you have before adding something new. I'm going to point at the jetpack elves again. We are 80% through the movie, and we need to resolve a problem. Jetpack elves.
Okay, so give it a grade.
Oh man, this movie, it's got to be a D. Like, the only reason it's not an F is because Tim Allen was funny.
Yeah, okay. I gave it a B, and that was just based on me basing my fact that it was a hard magic system just solely based on the fact that we have a regular person getting roped into becoming Santa Claus because of the contract.
You're biased because you like this movie. The same way I'm biased because I like Arthur Christmas.
I only barely just liked this movie, but yes.
All right.
Okay, so what else do we got
We have
here?
the Polar Express and Die Hard fell off of the list.
And Muppet Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol.
We'll do Muppet Christmas Carol last. Let's talk about Polar Express.
So Polar Express is another one of those movies that I honestly don't recommend your kids watching if they're under 8 or 9, because the movie goes from fun and jolly to really bone-chillingly creepy at the drop of a hat.
Yeah. This kind of has the air of a modern classic. Like, as I mentioned it to people around me, they would get reminiscent about it because anyone that is under, say, 40, this was like the movie that their teacher put on the Friday before Christmas, and they watched together in school.
I don't know. My teachers always put on A Christmas Story.
Well, there was a lot of people I talked to that this was the one. It was based on a Caldecott, a winning book. But the thing is, it was a 32-page picture book that they turned into an hour-and-a-half long feature film.
It feels that way.
And that's begging for inconsistencies and problems.
What are you talking about? What, like the train car full of creepy marionettes, or the Tokyo drifting across a glacier somehow in a train?
It's all just now, again, this is another movie where the magic gets abstracted away. Like in the middle, there's a bunch of peril and conflict and stuff, but at the bookends, it's just a wise grown-up teaching one or two kids important life lessons that they can carry with them for the rest of their life. Right?
I guess so. Just believe because you want to believe, because believing makes your life more magical, I guess, is kind of the point that came across here.
They started off in the beginning with the little girl that's the main character. I can't even remember his name. His little sister, basically doing what you said. All kids know that the problems with the Santa problem. She's like, the sleigh would have to go faster than the speed of light, and it would have to be the size of an ocean liner, to carry all the gifts. I mean, they're admitting right up front that none of this works.
Right.
And then they kind of establish that our main protagonist's problem is that he doesn't believe. What do you need to believe in, and what is it important to believe in? I don't know, because I think that is a more important question than belief isn't binary. Do you believe or not believe? It's, do you believe in the right things to the right degree?
So that's kind of the struggle that our protagonist has, is what is there to believe in?
No, I think that's what he should have. It felt like the movie was just saying he needs to believe. That was what, that's what the conductor punched into his ticket at the end is his lesson. As if they hadn't beat us over the head with each of our, 4 protagonists that they had lessons enough. At the very end, they all stand in line. The conductor punches their ticket and shows them on their ticket, this is the lesson the movie wanted you to learn.
So, yeah, like in your face. I do have to say this movie does have its upsides. There are some genuinely fun and enchanting scenes. I personally cannot get enough of that hot chocolate song and dance number. Just love it to death.
You're being sarcastic.
I'm really not. That's my favorite scene. You can ask anybody in my family. I will watch that twice whenever I watch it.
You got it.
Hot chocolate. I can't get enough of Tom Hanks like pseudo rapping.
Wait. I gotta know. Have you ever served your children hot chocolate and done an impersonation of that?
So we live in Arizona. The coldest it gets here is 70 something.
Okay.
I personally don't serve or make a lot of hot chocolate, but I promise you this: if I ever do, if I ever have hot chocolate in my hand, I can't say hot chocolate. I have to say hot chocolate.
Well, there's a problem, like I said, when you take a 32-page children's book and you turn it into a full-length feature film, where you take something that was just kind of mysteriously magical, and then you have to kind of flesh out the mechanics of it.
Yeah, this is why books are better than movies, because however you fill in the details in your mind are going to be 10 times better than what somebody's going to show you on a screen.
Yeah, and the fact that like this train's coming through the neighborhood where there weren't train tracks to begin with, that's it all begins or ends with that. Like, does a train need train tracks or not?
Oh, in this movie, clearly not. Like, so are we defining the magic of the train? Because, I mean, we have the train that goes where no train ever should go. Let's not even talk about the gradients that it goes up and down.
Yeah, gradients. Oh, my gosh.
The terrain that it has to surmount. The hobo, who may or may not be a ghost. I know, actually.
That wasn't even in the book. I don't even know why that character existed. It didn't really serve a purpose.
How Tom Hanks is every character in the movie that's an adult, which I'm actually okay with that one. Tom Hanks should play all the characters in all the movies.
There was no end of the use and misuse of magic in this book. It did not have any constraints whatsoever.
No. There's a whole scene where he lost, I'm going to do air quotes, lost somebody's ticket where it got sucked out of the train. And then through the most ridiculous, like, what are those machines, like the mouse traps of all, like this ball hits this rope and this swings down and knocks this over. Like that. Yeah. These unbelievable circumstances ends up back on the train somehow, miles down the track. You have to look it up now, don't you?
I totally do. I can't think of it.
This is why we're good bookends. I'm willing to blow past it and just kind of explain, knowing that our audience will fill in the name to their own personal extent. Ben has to know the word.
Rube Goldberg machine.
Rube Goldberg machine. The ridiculous Rube Goldberg machine of this ticket making it back onto the train. Just a complete departure for 5 minutes because we needed to fill screen time.
Yeah, it felt like that a lot. Just like it did in Arthur Christmas. Okay.
There's a roller coaster at the North Pole somehow that is like what those vacuum tube train sequences that turned into a ridiculous first person. Like I feel like there should have been a disclaimer on the screen, like, audience, put on your 3D goggles now, because it felt like they were trying to do a first-person, like, ride.
Yeah, there was a little bit. This movie fell into kind of an interesting niche of movies like this, where the director and crew were exploring a new technology, and it gave them new tools that filmmakers have never had. And they got a little bit too enamored with their technology. That was one of the remarkable things about Toy Story, is that they weren't so enamored with the new technological ground they were breaking that they let it get in the way of good storytelling. So
in this movie, you're referring to specifically, this was kind of at the point where 3D was becoming a cinematic thing.
Yes.
Yeah. It did feel like there was a few scenes where this scene exists to show off 3D.
Yes.
Okay.
It also suffered from some of the same problems as Santa Claus, where like our protagonist he's already at the North Pole, surrounded by numberless concourses of elves, and someone's saying to him, "Oh, you're a doubter." Like, what are we doubting? What are we still doubting at this point?
Yes, you rode a magic train to the North Pole. You're surrounded by elves. I am an elf talking to you. There's the guy there. There is a sack the size of a skyscraper. How can you doubt at this point?
What are we doubting now? Yeah, I mean, there was animals helping. The elves in this were really creepy. There's none of them do a good explanation of where the elves come from, or where they're going, or why they exist.
Those are questions better left unanswered, I think, man.
I think this film did very good with the kind of sense of awe. It's a good example of the Christmas movie genre when it comes to just feeling awe about everything.
Yeah. And like I don't know. At the end, like you said, the protagonist wakes up and it all could have been a dream, but there was still that hole in his pocket, and he did still have that magical bell that he could only him and his sister could hear ring because they still believed.
That's it. I mean, there was just inexplicable annoyances in this one. Like the kid with the glasses that's the know-it-all that was obviously voiced by an adult. Like just spend a minute casting an actual child.
No, because we want that nerd voice. Like that was the nerd kid. We got like I don't even know who that voice actor is, but he exclusively voices that character in different movies and films. I was like the know-it-all nerd. Oh, did you know what kind of train this is? Like everybody in this room wants you dead. Please shut up.
Yeah, from the second he opened his mouth. There was peril, but it wasn't real peril. There was pointless action. It was way too long, and the disbelief went on too long. Like I said, we love Tom Hanks, but I think they loved him a little too much. And he was the conductor, he was Santa, he was the father, he was the narrator,
and he was also Santa Claus. But he was also the father, and he voiced the father of the kid. I think that's kind of another one of those points where this whole thing could have been a dream, because in the dream, every adult male in it was the kid's dad.
Yeah. I'm done talking about this.
As a movie, again, this is a movie. As a movie, it gets high to medium marks. As a magic system, it falls to pieces because. So if we take
softest of soft,
let's
magic.
Throw away all the Christmas Santa Claus stuff, and we're left with a train that defies all logic, science, and technology.
Where does it come from? How does it work? What's the point?
How can you steer on
best if you look at it as a self-teaching dream about the necessity of believing in things that deserve to be believed in.
Okay, I get behind that. Like if we abstract the Christmas away, this is a movie about believing and or faith. Should you believe in things for no other reason than you should believe in them, and because they could enrich your life?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
soft magic system for the purposes of defining the conflict and establishing the lesson you just said. I think they did a good job using the magic system.
You know what? I will say that too, because when he got the bell, it fell off the reindeer at first. He couldn't hear it at the North Pole. And then he had, like, he said it, like, I believe, like, he had to make a conscious decision to believe. So, yeah. And then he could hear the bell. I'm with you.
Yeah.
That was a good
I'll give it an A-.
I'll give it a B, just because the movie was weird.
All right. That only leaves Muppet Christmas Carol. Now that we've gotten all the Santa Claus movies out of the way.
All right. So we're abstracting all of the Santa away because there's no Santa in this one. So all we're left is this weird Dickensian guilt trip that this guy has, and on a bad drug trip.
And the fact that we coexist with hand puppets and just act like they're equivalent exist.
We have to abstract that away, because that is an assumption of every Muppet movie, that there are Muppets that coexist and that they're just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
The vegetables talk. Some pigs are gentlemen. Some pigs are eaten at dinner. We're not differentiating.
That was a great example. I think we need to say here that this tale has been told and retold time and time again, usually without fail. They even did a version with Jim Carrey as Scrooge that was done in the style of the Polar Express with the CGI on top of live action CGI, whatever.
They did a full live action version of this in modern times called Scrooged with Bill Murray. I mean, this.
Yes.
The tale of this is not,
which is also good.
But the idea is that the core story here is not necessarily anything to do with Christmas, so much as somebody who looks back on their life and regrets the person that they are.
Yeah, and Christmas is a proxy here for just repentance. Not repentance necessarily in like a theistic sense, but just repentance of, can you reach a point in your life where you want to make a change?
You know what? You look at yourself, and this has got to be, something's got to give.
Yeah, and here the season of Christmas, the time of Christmas, is the catalyst for the change, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
In this movie, then, the magic system is that there are the spirit of his partners, because we have the two old guy Muppets that always come as a pair, that then explain he's going to be visited by other spirits that are going to take him on some self-discovery journey, some vision quest, hopefully, but probably fueled by peyote. Like, he just has this The only way I look at this movie is that this guy had like a
Bailey.
super hard drug trip and felt bad about yelling at his number 2 guy right before he went home from work. Like that's how I see this whole movie.
Yeah, and you know, you could look at it all as the most fantastical of magic systems, or it could just be like he woke up the next morning, it was all just a dream. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The consequence of that, and this was an important distinction between this and the Santa Claus. He woke up the next morning and had executed all of Christmas as the big red guy himself. But it did matter because he still had to go on doing it, and he needed to be Santa Claus next year, and he had on the silk pajamas that he got from the North Pole. But in this one, Scrooge wakes up the next morning. He'd had the fantastical experience that night, and he didn't have so much as like an artifact to remind him of the journey he took.
He could have dismissed the entire thing as a bad dream and gone on living his life the same way. It had to be an active choice and an ongoing choice to be the better person.
You know, when Chris Nolan made it Inception, one of the main ideas in that film was, can you put a new idea into someone's head? And this was an exploration of that same concept. You know, someone who'd lived his life and had developed his identity from a very young age as being someone who's selfish and thrifty and, you know, insensitive and cold and calculating. Can they change that about themselves and become someone new?
I don't know. And I think that's why this movie keeps getting remade, because that core right there, like you can abstract all of the Christmas out of this thing. And the idea that people regret the choices that they make in their lives, sometimes as they're making them, and they want to be a better person. And like just the courage and the ability to recognize and then be that better person is something we all want.
Yeah, I think that's why it keeps getting remade. And you know, I have to say, I can't unrecommend any of the iterations of it. Like Scrooge, the example you give, just kind of a modern fable version of it. It's great. The Bill Murray version one, I love that one. This is my favorite of all the retellings of it. For so many reasons. I mean, it's got all of the charm and warmth of the Muppet characters we know. The music is it's just fantastic. I love the music in this. The music in this is as good as the music in Nightmare Before Christmas was bad.
Aw, I like the music in Nightmare Before Christmas.
Well, this is that much better. It's so
I will
good.
say, what was I'm very bad with actors and actresses. What was the main actor's name in this one?
Michael Caine.
So I will say that he delivers almost exclusively all of his lines from the original Dickens text. And so, like, you have Gonzo and Rizzo, like, riffing and making the modern day references to random stuff.
Yeah, Gonzo's about 50-50 riffing and quoting from the text.
Yes, because he's our narrator. But to juxtapose these two speaking in, you know, modern English, normal language, and then having our main actor delivering nothing but the Victorian English lines, and somehow, like, I feel like this was one of the only portrayals of this character where you can feel the transformation happening throughout the movie. And like, you really like accept that this guy legitimately regrets his decisions and is going to change.
Yeah, at the beginning, you can see him sympathizing more with the past him.
Yeah.
Like when he's there at the Fozziwig's Christmas party, he's like, do you know how much you're spending on this party? He's like, yeah, what about that?
But at the same time, like, you can see him kind of like when he was a kid and he was in the classroom. He's talking about like, oh, Christmas was just like a time to get more stuff done. And like, he's saying these words and you can feel like you just know to the bones that this is a justification, that he regrets all of these decisions.
Oh, I loved it. I totally agree with you. You know, he's still repeating his justifications of the past, but you can see it's just regret because he lost the woman he loved.
Like, and he can explain it away, and he's clearly just trying to convince himself. Yeah. Just that is a great piece of acting by this guy.
So, yeah, great casting for Michael Caine. Great casting for Kermit as Bob Cratchit. Great, you know, everyone was perfectly cast in this movie.
I have to say, all right, so I like Muppet movies by and large, but Miss Piggy drives me nuts in every, like, I can't take it. Like, just stop.
You don't even like her in this one?
Miss Piggy whenever I see her, wherever I see her. I don't know what Kermit sees in her.
I'll give you that. I'm not even going to argue with it.
Kermit can do so much better. It's ridiculous. This self-absorbed, just
okay,
I can't.
You just shot a hole in my childhood because it's like one of the immutable truths of my childhood that Kermit and Piggy are destined to be together. But now that you say that, I don't know why.
Because it's just portrayed that way. It's like Kermit loves Piggy, but never really acknowledges it, and Piggy loves Kermit to death. Like, yeah, it's clear. All the
like
ladies...
Mickey and Minnie feel like a match.
Yeah, but all the...
Donald and Daisy.
Kermit should be universally loved.
Kermit and Piggy, they can't even reproduce. They're not even the same species.
Well, it's... Everybody should love Kermit because he is just a good guy, and he's just trying to do the right thing in all of his roles.
He can do
all
better.
of his iterations. And Miss Piggy is this self-absorbed, horrible person. Why does he love her? It's such an abusive relationship. I don't get it.
I'm reading through my notes here, and the music is coming up in my head. It's just such good music. Oh my gosh, the music in that movie is
so I'm sure you can name the composer off the top of your head or from your notes.
No.
Oh. So you just...
No.
All right, so this is it. Ladies and gentlemen, right here. You know that Ben Rich really, really loved something, and it transported him when he did not do the meta research to figure out where it came from. He just enjoyed it for what it was. That's a...
Miles Goodman and Paul Williams. I don't know who those guys are.
But are you listening to what I'm saying? I'm saying this to listeners, but I'm saying this to you.
Yes. You're pointing out the fact that I hadn't bothered to look it up meant that it took me out of it so much I didn't go meta.
I want you to understand that I am transported that way in almost every movie I watch. Except for the Santa Claus. I could not get into it. I was on my phone.
Okay, I think that's a good litmus, that it took me out of my normal self so much that I didn't bother to do the meta research.
There it is. That's the Mendoza line for Ben Rich right there. That's how you know he enjoyed it, when he didn't research it.
I can't remember what Emily Cratchit's character is like in the original book.
No, I've never read the original book.
But Miss Piggy did what Miss Piggy does. She took the role and made it hers.
No, she did the same thing that freaking Tim Allen did, is she was Miss Piggy as. It's not this person being played by Miss Piggy.
Miss Piggy as Emily Cratchit.
This person. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But Gonzo as Dickens, all right. Statler and Waldorf as the Marleys. I think it was just singular in the original, but okay, we'll take them as the Marleys.
Because they come as a pair and they play off each other. You got to have that.
Yeah. Fozzie Bear as Fezziwig. Good. Fozziwig. Easy.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. I liked the bald eagle guy as the headmaster, who totally broke the fourth wall and was like, the American way.
Yes, and the American way.
To,
the British way.
It's like, there's a little Muppet joke there.
I love the child actor that plays Scrooge in that scene, where whatever it is that the ridiculous, eagle says, and then he goes, "Yes, headmaster," because that's one I always quote from that movie. Yes, headmaster.
Yeah, even if your headmaster is a ridiculous American bald eagle before America was a thing.
So, as a child, whenever I watched this movie, let me see, when did it come out? I want to make sure it didn't come out before then, and I'm remembering.
It came out when you were 24, and this is
in 1992. So I was 14 when it came out. As a child, when I saw this, and now when I see it, I'm just enchanted by it. But I could never get into the stupid "The Love Is Gone" musical in the garden. Now I'm going to get really controversial here because I've seen a debate about this break out online. When Disney re-released this on Disney Plus this year, they'd edited that scene out.
Which scene?
This you don't remember?
I watched it on
it's
Disney
a scene
Plus
during the Spirit of Christmas Past, when he goes and sees his past self meeting and courting. I forget the woman's name that he had fallen in love with, and was telling her they couldn't get married because he hadn't saved up enough money, his investments hadn't matured or whatever. And then that scene immediately after, in the original theatrical release and in the VHS release and in the DVD release, it had a musical number where they sing a duet about the love being gone. It's long and slow, and it really kind of is just this drag in the middle of the movie.
Yes, that was not in the version of the movie that I just watched, because I watched it on Disney Plus, and that sounds terrible.
It is. But apparently some people remember the totality of this movie so fondly that they take that as an affront, and they think that ruins the integrity of the movie. I think it was a strict improvement. I don't feel like there was anything lost in the additional development of the romance between the two characters and that 4 extra minutes of singing. It was just strictly better without it. as a kid, I eventually got to the point where I'd fast forward through it.
I tend to be that as well. Like, I don't care about the revisionist type of stuff when it comes to popular media like this. Now, if we're talking about actual historical text and things, that's different.
All right.
But revision of movies is fine to make them better.
Okay, I'm going to press you on this, and this is my chance for us to talk about Star Wars in the middle of our Christmas movie.
Well, that's the huge asterisk for revisionist. Like, it has to be.
How do you feel about the George Lucas revisions to the original Star Wars trilogy?
This is rule 0. If you're going to revise something, the only justification for revising something is to make it better, not strictly worse. So.
Okay, yeah, and I think removing the Garden Love song made this strictly better.
Spoilers for Star Wars in our Christmas special somehow.
Okay, so hard or soft magic system. What are we saying is the magic here? The dream sequence?
Are we calling it a dream? Like, if it was a dream, if it was a hallucination, if it was a magical journey, whatever. That is the magic in it, is that he had this life flashing before his eyes kind of experience.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't really matter if it was magic or not.
It felt kind of hard because all of this could have, like, there was no external information he got. All of this could easily have been fabricated by his own mind with information that he had.
Yeah.
He didn't learn anything new.
He didn't gain any physical objects. He didn't change the past.
Yeah. The only thing is he could have fabricated the conversation of his nephew playing charades or 20 questions or whatever. Because
oh, that was brutal. Every time I watch that scene, that's just brutal.
He doesn't know for sure.
He attends his own roast.
Yeah.
But without it being the kind of roast where you're there and it's known that you're there.
But it also seems like Scrooge is an intelligent enough person to know what people think about him, that he would be able to kind of make up that conversation to a close approximation of what it actually was.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say hard magic on this. It all could have come from his mind.
I agree. And as far as the 3 rules, I feel like maybe Brandon Sanderson got these rules from Dickens, because it's like Dickens lays them out, you know? The spirits show up and they say, listen, here are the rules. You know, Bob, the Marleys say, all right, you're going to be visited by spirits. Here's when they're going to come. And they come right when they said they're going to come, and they say, you're here, and they can't hear you, and you got to walk. You can walk through walls, but you can't. It's all, they just tell you the rules, and they follow the rules.
Yes.
And everything happens exactly like they said it.
I'm with that. We, as the audience, know the limitations of the magic system, and the filmmakers and the storyteller conform to that. The limitations are more interesting in that because he can't interact with all this. This is just playing out before his eyes. It's just, we're not making anything up. This is just the world as it is, and we're showing you pictures of it. How does it make you feel, you cold-hearted bastard?
And then he wakes up the next morning, and he has to take on life with where he is right now.
Expand on what you have before you add anything new. I don't know how much that really applies here. The Ghost of Christmas Future is the only place where, like, new stuff is introduced, and it's interesting how Dickens approached the explaining to Scrooge that he was dead by having this weird scene where you have unknown characters talking about robbing his house blind. That's odd. Like, if you're not really clued in, like, I remember not understanding that at all as a child. Like, what are they talking about with the dressing gown and the curtains or whatever? It takes, like, an adult's understanding of subtext to realize, oh, they stole all that crap from his house.
Yeah, and maybe that was something that would be more easily understood by someone of that period.
Maybe. Yeah, because people breaking into other people's houses that they know are dead to steal all of their stuff, that's not a very common occurrence in modern society, I hope.
But it might have been.
But it might have been very common back then, yeah. Vultures literally descending and picking your corpse clean.
Yeah. Well, that was actually part of what happened in the Italian Job, if you remember. I actually had someone break into William Capella's house and steal some of his stuff. But
if they knew he was dead and they knew there was thousands of dollars of car parts. Episode 9, everybody. That was a good episode.
Okay. So, we give that one a hard and an A?
Yeah, I'll give it a hard and an A minus. Miss Piggy, you brought the whole thing down.
I'll give it an A. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our Christmas movie review. I think there's enough bones there that we could do that again next year with 5 completely new movies.
Die Hard's got to make the list next year.
Okay.
I
don't know what we'll do to talk about the magic of Die Hard. but I think it kind of
I can't tell you how many times I saw the Reddit meme of "It's not really Christmas" until you've seen Hans Gruber fall off a Yakatomi Plaza.
Well, you got my mind going in that the fact that we talked about how A Christmas Carol didn't necessarily have to be set in Christmas. It's just the story of, can someone change their stars in the middle of their life?
Well, I mean, at the same way that Nightmare Before Christmas is about any midlife crisis if you remove the whole Christmas aspect of it.
Yeah, and Santa Claus is about just the midlife, about the crisis of a dad who lost his family to divorce, trying to gain back the love of his child.
Arthur Christmas is about two sons trying to find their place in their father's shadow.
Huh.
Like, go ahead.
I loved that summary of those movies.
Well, if you've
fantastic.
made it with us to the 2 hour and 20 minute mark, then that's your TLDR for all of the movies we just talked about.
Well, one other thing, we'd promised next time that we would do a book review. We didn't get any input from the listeners, so we're going to just maintain our inertia here and go with Ready Player 2 that just came out a month ago. And we will review that on episode 37. So if you'd like to read along, Ready, Set, Go.
Ready Player 2, which is the sequel to Ready Player 1, which is a book that I have not read, but I've seen the movie. I am hoping that the movie portrayed enough of the plot that the book will make sense when I read it. If not, it's fine. We'll make it up as we go.
And as always, thanks for being a listener of the Bad Imagine podcast. We appreciate your time and you being part of the gang. Please interact with us on Facebook or Reddit if you felt like you want to set the record straight or something you want to correct, or add your voice to the debate on whether or not you think that the love song scene should be cut out of Muppet Christmas Carol, or anything else that piqued your interest during your listen today. Come join in.
If you like the podcast, please recommend us to a friend. We can't express enough how much that helps us out. If you really love what we do and can't get enough of it, please consider becoming one of our patrons on Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Thanks everybody for listening.